Well, how y'all doing today? We're streaming today. We're streaming today. I hope you're doing fine. There's so many streams for us to see, but this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're well. Now, come on and join me. Watch the world go to hell because we're streaming today. We're streaming away. Let's stream. Let's stream today. Hey guys, how you doing today? Real cooker of a day today. It's really cloudy today and there's a nice wind, but boy howdy is it still hot. Feel like I'm a hot sticky mess, honestly, just boiling away in my apartment. My little puppy over here, sitting here with his just trying to stay cool. So if you hear the fans really going in the background, I apologize, but I got to make sure that I'm not passing out due to heat. An unbelievably bad situation, right? Well, let's start. Oops. Oh, saying that I've got no data here. Hold on. Okay. No, just checking my stream, making sure everything's good to go. Well, as we always do here, we're going to start with Mr. David Lynch giving us an update from Los Angeles.
Good morning. It's August 25, 2021, and it's a Wednesday. Here in LA, a kind of a hazy morning, very still right now, 64 degrees Fahrenheit, around 18 Celsius. Today I was thinking about the song How Deep Is Your Love by the Bee Gees. This afternoon it'll be going up to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. It's around 29 Celsius.
Hey Vince, how you doing?
And it looks like this haze will burn away by mid-morning, and after that we should be enjoying beautiful blue skies and golden sunshine all along the way. Everyone, have a great day.
You too, David. I
Good
hope you
morning.
have a good day. Unfortunately, hey Crouching, how you doing? Unfortunately, I can't show you the Bee Gees song because it's off copyright and I couldn't find a very good version of it. So I think we'll just skip over that part today. Swirl the numbers, it's going to be a 4, baby. You bet. So you're going with 4. I think I'm stuck on 6 today. What about you, Vince? You gonna get in on this? Got to guess the number between 1 and 10.
Here we go for today's number.
Just love his hat.
It's August 25,
hat.
2021.
So it's 4, 5, 6.
10 balls. Each ball has a number. Numbers 1 through 10.
Here we go. Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. Pick a number.
Here we go.
Today's number is 9.
Oh, dang. 9 is one of the magic numbers. There was a period of time there in David Lynch's number picking where he hadn't picked a 9 for like 84 days or 85 days, long period of time, and now he's picked like a 9 at least once a week. So, I think that the curse on the 9 has been lifted. I know, Crouching, I know. Well, you know what? You know what we can say? You, Crouching, said a 4, and Vince said 5. 4 plus 5 is 9. Right? I think we did it. 4 plus 5 is 9. So one of the things that I think I want to start dedicating myself a little bit to is actually reading aloud an article that I find that I think has valuable information and really reminds people of something. And I think today I'm going to be reading something from rabble.ca. It's Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives Prepare to Return Canada to Austerity. This is written by Jim Stanford. I think that this is an important article because I feel like, yes, austerity, yay, exactly, Vince. I think that this is an important article to have out in the atmosphere right now, to have in the world, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are just sort of treating the Conservatives in a very, what I would call, gullible manner, right? More NDPers to just ship to join the Liberals because of the fear-mongering this year. Eye roll. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, if you go to the aggregate data, as one of my big critiques about how the media is reporting on this election is that, where is the article? I had a brilliant article all ready to pay for this. Yes, this is it right here. Like, this is more or less how it's being reported from, like, Global News. Liberals, Conservatives in dead heat as Trudeau's popularity dips. Like, they're not in a dead heat, right? Like, Trudeau's popularity has dipped, right? For sure that's happened. We have the data to support that claim. But to say that they're in a dead heat implies that they're anywhere near the finish line, right? The finish line is a majority government. And this, I would call this straight out misreporting, honestly, because if you go here and you get the seat projection of the aggregate data, the Liberals are at 146 seats and the Conservatives are still behind them at 128. And, like, in terms of their percentages, they're about equal, but they're nowhere near crossing the finish line on this. And I think that Canadians could stomach a Conservative minority government. Like, I think a Conservative minority government would be quite revealing of the Conservatives in many ways. But right now, people are kind of having this, like, because the honeymoon is over with Justin Trudeau, and the Liberals are running such a disastrous campaign, and they are running a disastrous campaign. The people are looking at the Conservatives and are saying, oh, they're offering this and they're offering that, and look, and the Conservatives are running to the left of the Liberals in this election because the Conservatives are well aware that if they offer nothing, they get nothing, right? But the commentaries that I've been seeing surrounding the Conservatives actually moving to the left and offering things to the populace, I mean, it's completely gullible. Like, you have to be a gullible rube to bite down on this. And it looks like there's lots of people who are just gullibly believing that the Conservatives are genuine. When we have a voting record, right? We have the voting record for the Conservatives for the last 40 years. We know how they vote. We know what they support. We know what they push forward. We know what they're, like, we have the evidence, right? But all they have to do, apparently, to deceive huge sections of the populace is stand up and tell a very comfortable lie. And people go on for that. And Vince is saying not just that, but now Elections Canada won't allow universities to do voting. Yep. Students have to vote elsewhere. Really bad considering 2015 and 19 they allowed universities to vote. Well, and really bad considering that the youth vote is the vote that supports the NDP, right? That you just take a look at who's voting NDP, and it's people under the age of 40. And so, got to suppress the youth vote somehow, exactly. It's amazing the Liberal platform is worse than literally every party. It's amazing. Yeah. Like, it's stunning to see. Like, it's actually quite staggering. They're offering literally nothing. And, like, the media is making hay of the Liberals' like housing promises, but the Liberals are literally just offering what the Conservatives are offering. That the Conservatives came out with a housing policy that doesn't actually address the issue, and I'll get into how the media is reporting on this housing crisis, and how I think that the way the media is reporting on the housing crisis is a complete and total disaster, right? That just the way that they're even talking about the housing crisis is itself, anyway, you'll see. I'll get into it as we go along. But, the first thing that I would like to do, and this is how I want to spend the first hour of my shows, is reading an article that I think is important. And the article that I would like to read today is, I'll talk about that later, Vince. The article I would like to read today is from rabble.ca, Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives prepare to return Canada to austerity. This is from Jim Stanford. My mistake. Jim Stanford. During the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the sacred and long-standing precepts of neoliberal macroeconomics were thrown out the window. And for good reason. Dramatic interventions in both fiscal and monetary policy in Canada and other countries helped economies get through the pandemic and resulting recession. Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives, however, are now signaling that they will quickly reverse course and resuscitate those neoliberal principles if they form the next government. Governments around the world racked up eye-watering deficits as they opened the fiscal taps to support personal incomes, subsidize businesses, and finance public health responses. Canada was no exception. The federal deficit exceeded $350 billion for 2020 to 21, or about 15% of national GDP, the biggest in relative terms since World War II. And unimaginable in conventional economic discourse. Canada's deficit was among the largest of OECD countries, indicating a relatively ambitious response to that pandemic. But most industrial countries also incurred very large deficits. Across the whole OECD, they averaged about 12% of GDP. Meanwhile, provincial governments also incurred record-breaking deficits due to reduced revenues and increased health and other program costs. Every province, except New Brunswick, whose COVID-insulated economy traversed the pandemic better than any other, incurred large deficits. Alberta's, at close to 7% of GDP, was by far the biggest. In monetary policy, too, the conventional obsession with inflation control and monetary rectitude, already shaken by the global financial crisis 12 years earlier, was abandoned in most countries in favor of extraordinary interventions to support spending. Until COVID-19, the Bank of Canada had refused to join other leading central banks in a practice called quantitative easing, using the bank's money creation powers to buy assets, largely but not solely government bonds, in hopes of boosting money supply, bank lending, and spending. That practice was routinely practiced by other central banks in recent years, in Japan's case, for over 25 years. But the Bank of Canada had refused to use that tool. Given the magnitude of the economic shock caused by COVID-19, the Bank of Canada finally jumped into the QE fray. Beginning in March 2020, the bank purchased some $335 billion in federal bonds and about $20 billion of provincial bonds to boot. Those purchases, some made directly in new bond auctions and some bought second-hand in commercial markets, kept interest rates super low despite the financial uncertainty associated with the pandemic. They also made it easier for the federal and provincial governments to finance their unprecedented deficits. The combination of these two dramatic shifts in macroeconomic policy exposed the lie of austerity upon which the neoliberal economic and social policies have been based for decades. Harsh government cutbacks were always explained on grounds that government just can't afford to spend more. This lie was critical to the formation and legitimation of austerity. Why would populations accept endless belt-tightening, cuts in public services, and privatization of public assets without this specter of a binding budget constraint tying the hands of even progressive governments? The pandemic proved something progressive argued for years. There is virtually no fiscal constraint to the ability of governments, especially national governments, which possess independent currencies and financial regulatory powers, to mobilize resources in the interest of social and environmental well-being, if they choose to do so. Canadian governments raise hundreds of billions of dollars to support extensive income supports through measures not dissimilar from the basic income vision advanced by many progressives, subsidized wages and protect employment in the face of macroeconomic chaos, and invest in expanded physical and social infrastructure, even stretching to the introduction of whole new programs like national child care. The ultimate limit on the capacity to deliver these reforms and supports is the real productive capacity of the economy, not the government's budget. As long as the economy languishes far below that capacity limit, the government can and should use its capacity to raise money, including creating it through a publicly regulated and partially publicly owned banking system, and spend it to stimulate more work, output, and income, preferably in socially useful undertakings. The dawning reality that government can do amazing things when it chooses to poses an existential threat to the narrative that underpins neoliberal fiscal and monetary policy. Even mainstream economists have been generally supportive of the extraordinary measures taken during the pandemic. Most recognize that adherence to traditional strict doctrines of deficit reduction and inflation control would have turned the COVID recession into an outright depression. Neoliberal purists were always uncomfortable, however, with the idea that large fiscal and monetary interventions to support public health, public services, employment, and infrastructure could be seen as anything more than the short-term emergency measures. Conservative politicians went along with these interventions, to an extent, and in many countries it was conservatives who oversaw them, but always with an eye to cramming the genie back into the bottle as soon as possible. The current federal election campaign has confirmed the Conservative Party of Canada's desire to quickly restore traditional neoliberal goals: smaller government, balanced budgets, and an overarching commitment to inflation control, which is always the most important priority for owners of financial wealth, given the impact of higher inflation on their accumulated holdings. If they form government, Canadians should expect a whiplash-inducing reversal of the extraordinary measures that were implemented during the pandemic. The consequences for macroeconomic recovery, employment and social policy, the new national child care program would be the first, but not only, casualty of a return to fiscal rectitude, would be enormous. For months during the pandemic, Pierre Poilievre, then the party's finance critic, still a prominent spokesperson and likely frontrunner for a party leader in the event of O'Toole's falters, was the most outspoken critic of financial and monetary supports. He lambasted both the government's large deficits and the Bank of Canada's money creation. In the bank's case, Poilievre's attacks were extraordinary and aggressive, accusing the bank of becoming an ideological tool, serving as an ATM for the Trudeau government's rampant spending. Given the accepted mainstream consensus for the last generation in Canada that the bank should be politically independent from the government, this attack was like throwing a grenade into the polite company of Canada's political and economic elite. Shortly afterward, Poilievre was demoted from his critic post, shuffled to critic for job and industry. He has remained an outspoken and, in some circles, effective advocate of a quick return to neoliberal fundamentals, balancing the budget, refocusing monetary policy on inflation control, and simultaneously and contradictorily blaming the Trudeau government for inflation, deficits, and unemployment at the same time. O'Toole has walked a more nuanced line in attacking the Trudeau government's deficits, knowing that the life-saving policies that caused those deficits, like CERB and wage subsidies, were very popular with the public. After all, some 9 million Canadians received government income support at some time during the pandemic. So the old political logic of welfare bashing is no longer as effective for Conservatives as it once was. Nevertheless, O'Toole has attacked the federal deficit, without saying what programs he would have eliminated to reduce it, blamed Trudeau for the increase in inflation that has accompanied the reopening of the economy, and pledged to balance the budget within a decade if elected. That pledge would require years of deep austerity in federal spending, and would almost certainly throw ice water on the economy's rebound from the COVID recession. The experience of Europe after the GFC is painful evidence of self-inflicted harm caused by fiscal restraint during periods of macroeconomic crisis. Mind you, we should have already learned that same lesson back in the 1930s. The modest increase in inflation in recent months, the year-over-year rate hit 3.7% in July, has provided fuel for loud conservative warnings about the menace of fiscal and monetary laxity. Those arguments are not credible. The uptick in inflation has been driven mostly by gasoline prices. Excluding gasoline, the rate was 2.8%, and a few other volatile commodities. The core inflation rate, with volatile items stripped out, was just 1.7%. Still below the Bank of Canada's target. Short-run price measures resulting from the sudden reopening of large segments of the economy, such as hospitality, after the lockdowns should be expected, even welcome. Indeed, for years the Bank of Canada has missed its 2% target from below. Over the last decade, inflation has fallen below the target twice as often as above. A period of above-target inflation would only help to offset the bank's previous errors in keeping inflation too low, an error on which the Tories were deathly silent. None of that stops O'Toole from using the inflation data to stoke his broader campaign of fear about the consequences of Canada's recent monetary and fiscal policies. The Tories' lift in public opinion polls during the campaign indicates that these traditional, tough love tropes of fiscal discipline, the threat of inflation, and the consequences of income supports for the work ethic of Canadians still have political legs, even though few economists, even mainstream ones, endorse their call for fiscal and monetary restraint. The fact that their commitment to balancing the budget and controlling inflation is completely at odds with their long list of potentially expensive spending promises, including an expansion of EI benefits, business subsidies, and even taxpayer-supported restaurant meals 3 days a week, should not fool Canadians. When push comes to shove, if they hold the reins of fiscal and monetary policy, Canada will undoubtedly be heading back to an unforgiving and austere brand of neoliberalism. And fast. Jim Stanford is an economist and director of the Centre for Future Work and divides his time between Vancouver and Sydney. He tweets at Jimbo Stanford. Oh, always lovely to read an article. That was a little bit more technical than I was expecting, honestly, but really digs in the point that the Conservatives, and it's not like they're hiding it, right? It's not like they're pretending. They've been talking about how they want to privatize the healthcare system, that Aaron O'Toole has essentially said that he would leave it up to the provinces if they would like to privatize their system. So Aaron O'Toole's government comes in and Doug Ford starts privatizing the healthcare system, and Aaron O'Toole's not going to stop him, right? This is extremely dangerous for Canadians. And largely, I think it is because Canadians still think that deficits operate the same way that a bank loan operates. They genuinely think that a deficit is a loan that you're taking out and something that you're going to pass on to future generations, and future generations need to pay for it. And it's literally not how it works. It's just not how the system operates. But it's not stopping grifters like Aaron O'Toole from using that lever in order to convince a gullible population into fooling them, right? Even the most liberal-based Redditors are starting to admit that liberals really do suck. Well, this campaign, Vince, is such a disaster. It's such a disaster. Like, the fact that the liberals are running to the right of the conservatives and are not really offering much of anything, right? Are not offering much of anything. Should be very, very, very concerning for us. Like, it should be very, very concerning. And we'll see what happens in the debates. The liberals have been known to pull rabbits out of their hats in debates, but so far it does have people asking, like, and it has people asking in the media, what the heck is going on with Justin Trudeau? What is going on with these liberals, right? Over a week into the campaign, Trudeau is yet to make a case for himself, and that's fundamentally true, right? He has not stood up and actually made a case for his government. He's not actually this is a job interview, you guys. Like, this is a job interview. They're interviewing to literally be the leader of the country. And Trudeau is not offering anything. He's not standing up, and he's not even defending his own legacy, because ultimately Trudeau's legacy is terrible. Trudeau has a terrible legacy, right? Trudeau's legacy is one of bamboozling the populace into believing that he gives a shit about climate change while buying pipelines, right? It's about convincing people that he gives a shit about Indigenous rights while suing or while fighting Indigenous people in court and attacking Indigenous land, sending our CMP into unceded Indigenous land, and while protecting his father's legacy in the residential school homes, right? Like, and it's like this on every single policy platform you want to talk about. Like, what's Trudeau's actual legacy? Like, what has Justin Trudeau and these liberals done that you can genuinely say is going to carry into the future in meaningful ways? And this is how embarrassing Justin Trudeau's government is, in my view. Justin Trudeau's government is worse than Harper's government. That Harper's government at least passed things like the childcare benefit. That's something that people don't really know, that Canada has a childcare benefit. It's something, if you have kids, right, the government gives you a certain amount of support. It's been an extremely successful project. It's essentially a basic income for children. For every dollar you put in, you get $2 of economic activity back. So it's been extremely successful as a policy, implemented by the Harper government, and he never talks about it. He never brings it up. Nobody ever brings up the fact that Stephen Harper put in a child care benefit, dropped child poverty by a significant amount in this country. The Trudeau Liberals have done absolutely nothing like that. They've done absolutely nothing even remotely close to that. They don't give a fuck at all about any of that, right? They don't give a fuck at all about any of that. That everything that they do is just a momentary convenience, right? Like, well, we've got to pass the CERB or else there'll be these big problems, all that kind of stuff, but it's just a momentary convenience. They don't genuinely believe in the policy to structurally change Canada in positive or important ways. It's just a temporary measure to throw in right now. And that's essentially what the Trudeau Liberals have manifested into. They're just a temporary measure, right? They're just a temporary measure that Canadians put in to get rid of the Harper government. That's it. That's the entire legacy of the Trudeau government. And once they're out of office, we will forget that they were even there, because they were so unimportant to us. Like, they've done nothing of value, right? And their policies, their current platform is so embarrassing and cringy that even the Conservatives are outflanking them on the left. Like, I go and I protest and I help organize a protest against the abuse that we are inflicting on the disabled in this country. That if you're disabled in this country, you're receiving less support than even the Americans give. We give 3 times less support than the European nations do. What we are doing can only be described as wholesale abandonment. There's no other way to describe it. And the liberals aren't even running on increasing the disability that we give, while the conservatives are running on doubling it. Right? The conservatives are running on doubling it. And given that it's Stephen Harper that put in the childcare benefit, I'm akin to believe them. Right? I can't think of a reason to vote for these liberals. Right? That even, like, and I'm saying this with the full awareness that Aaron O'Toole is walking around saying Canada first. He's walking around doing dog whistling tweets that follow Nazi codes. He's walking around, his MPs are walking around giving money to literal racial purity cults, right? That's Falun Gong, that's the Epic Times. And yet, here I am saying, these conservatives are looking a little bit better than these liberals. Now, of course, Jim here reminds us of the rot underneath the conservatives, and this is completely the truth. Aaron O'Toole's conservatives prepare to return Canada to austerity is absolutely the truth. But in my view, this all flows in to the major problem that Canadians are facing. That we as a people are facing an enormous problem, and that problem is that we're extremely gullible. That we have a massive crisis on our hands. Not only do we have the climate change crisis that is going to destroy us, like it is the largest existential crisis of our lifetime, without a doubt. Maybe in the history, no, I shouldn't even say maybe. It is the largest existential crisis that the species has ever faced. We are facing it as a species, and we are failing it. We are facing an economic collapse that has gotten so bad that it's even affecting upper middle class Canadians who have sacrificed their whole lives working in jobs that they hate for people they don't know, and they can't even turn around and buy houses. That the economic system has completely calcified and collapsed. But layered on top of all of that, in my view, is the major crisis that Canadians are extremely gullible. That we are completely gullible when it comes to our politicians and when it comes to our leadership. We are not skeptical whatsoever. We believe anything we're told by these obvious grifters, and we are still completely willing to go along with it. That instead of doing what needs to be done, which is completely abandoning these guys, right? And it is going to require a wholesale and complete abandonment to get rid of these neoliberals, right? That neoliberal economics has infected the discourse so badly, and it's infected our brains so badly that we can't expect the people who have been espousing neoliberal doctrine to suddenly flip the script and actually care about citizens. That's not part of what they're interested in. That we have to get rid of all of the parties that are espousing this, because it's a rot that has infected our brains and has rotted our brains. And to do that, we have to get rid of both the liberals and the conservatives. But Canadians are too gullible for this. We're too easy to deceive. We're too easy to trick. It's very easy to trick Canadians. Like, literally, the conservatives are seeing a boost in the polls because they've stood up and said what is ostensibly a whole pack of lies. They're not going to do any of this, right? They're not going to, try to make housing cheaper for people. They're not going to do any of that, right? It's just a series of comfortable lies, and a gullible Canadian populace is just bobbing their head going like, oh yeah, I'll completely forget the last 40 years of austerian policies. I'll completely forget the last 40 years of neoliberal economics that have completely undercut our society and destroyed us and created economic collapse after economic collapse after economic collapse. I'll completely ignore all of that because Aaron O'Toole stood up and said he was going to make housing cheaper. And I believe him. Like, we have a massive gullibility problem. We literally, and I think it's because we live in a system that has trained us to stay as children, that we maintain this kind of childish view of our society, that we are coddled, and I don't mean like in a like the woke kind of way. I'm talking about the people who literally like went to school and did everything they were told and were good, obedient students in school, graduated with high marks, because that's how you get high marks in school. You do what you're told, right? So you do what you're told in school, get the good marks so that you go into university, do what you're told in university, get the good marks in university so that you move on, get the good job where you continue doing what you're told, right? Because that's what the system is vetting for. It's vetting for obedience. It's vetting people to be obedient, humble workers, right? And the people who are the best at it get the best jobs at being the most subservient. That's what your job is in this society. And because this training is so built in, it turns these coddled, swaddled, rich upper class citizens into gullible rubes. They're just, we're not capable of actually understanding that both the liberals and the conservatives are allies, that they work together, and they're lying to us. And I don't know what it's going to take for us to recognize that this is the case, right? And the idea that the society, in as much as we have a society, but the idea that the country is going to suddenly go back to austerian politics, and that literally we're going to say to people who have had their lives crushed because of COVID, just get a job, as the economy continues to collapse, as precarious work spreads, as poverty grows, as homelessness grows, is grotesque. And I'm very afraid that that's where we're headed. I'm very afraid that we are just going to be headed towards a hard nose. We'll just go out into the streets and die. And this is why I protest. September 18th, if you're in Toronto, come to my protest, 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Yonge and Dundas Square. Because, like, we've got to grow up. Like, we've got to grow up. We're being led by the nose as if we're children, and it's time to dig our heels in, right? It's time to dig our heels in and realize that the people who are leading us are working, either are outright sociopaths or are working for the interests of sociopaths. It's time for us to wake up and realize that the people who are running this place are not helping us. They are our enemies. Right? That Canada is not a society. Canada is a business. And the owners of that business are more than willing to fire you and throw you out on the street and then take a bunch of cops and beat the shit out of you so that you'll get out of the rich people's view. Right? That's what the society is doing. Again, insofar as we have a society. Like, I got to stop saying that we have a society. We're not a society. Like, we're at best a country. But we are a business. Right? We are a business. And this problem of massive gullibility, like, what is it going to take? Like, what is it going to take? Like, I know people who literally are staying in, like, abusive relationships with people they don't even like. But because, why? And it just seems like that's the relationship that we have with the Liberal and Conservative Party. That, like, yeah, sure, they beat the shit out of us, and they don't really, do anything worthwhile, and they yell at us, and when we start to put up a fuss, they buy us roses, though. Get rid of these guys. Like, get rid of these guys. Break up. Break up with them. I don't even know what to say anymore. Just break up with these guys. Ugh. So, Vince, did you see Mariam Monsef saying Taliban were her brothers? I think that that's a miscommunication, mainly, Vince. I think that she even clarified the point later on. I didn't delve too deep because I assumed it was just a miscommunication. And I assume that it's a miscommunication. I don't think she's standing around being like, the Taliban are my brothers and I love them. I think that she was like probably quoting something, right? And I suspect it's mainly just a miscommunication. So don't dig too deep into that. Because, like, I mean, like, what, are you kidding me? Like, a liberal is going to stand up and say the Taliban are her brothers? No, absolutely not. The liberals are talking about staying in Afghanistan. Like, the liberals are talking about staying in Afghanistan. Yeah, here you go. Canadian forces to remain in Kabul after August 31st deadline of security permits, says Trudeau. Right? They're just going to stay. Like, the Americans can leave, but we'll continue wasting money on this failed war. Right? So, exactly, without the CERB, many would be living in a van down by the river. What is the end game? Keeping people in poverty? Jesus? I genuinely think that the end game is to get as many people in a privatized prison system as you can get. I think that the conservatives and the liberals are looking at the way that the American system is working with a privatized prison system and just start arresting people and start putting them in prison the way that the American system works. Yeah, neoliberals are the worst people on earth, not even real people. I mean, he did say about she-covery. Bazinga, you're right, dude. Oh, wow. Hold on. Wait a minute. She-covery? Oh, shit. I do have a poll here that actually really gives an insight, actually, into... Where the heck... There it is. Perfect. I'm a genius. I'm going to get into this in just a minute. Let me go through the comments here. Canadians are just too nice, meaning they'll get walked all over. We need a backbone, man. Well, the too nice thing, right? Like, that's all just presentational, right? We've been trained. It's just pageantry, right? We're as vicious and brutal as the Americans are, right? Like, you could just take a look at our policies. You could take a look at how we treat the rest of the world, right? Like, we're selling arms to Saudi Arabia to commit a genocide. We're selling arms to Israel to continue the genocide of Palestinians. We're propping up the empire wherever we go, right? We're just as racist and we're just as brutal. Like, we're not nice. We just look nice, right? We've just figured out how to be how to have pageantry. This is what I say about the society, right? Like, our society, insofar as it exists, is the equivalent of when somebody asks you how you're doing today, you say fine. It's not true, right? It's just something you say to get the conversation over with and move on with your life, right? And that's our whole society. Our whole society is just like, yeah, fine, right? And it's not. Like, it's super not. Hey, Aga, how you doing? Good to see you, bud. I think that Canadians don't want to think about these issues. Yeah. They've pushed politics and decision-making away from their thinking. Absolutely. And when they do pay attention, because it's so difficult, they only really are paying attention in big superficial ways, right? And I've really noticed this when it comes to pointing out that Aaron O'Toole is a white supremacist, right? Which he is, like, obviously. And you can provide all the evidence you want, right? You can provide all the evidence you want, and people will just simply not pay attention. Because the idea that the leader of the opposition is a white supremacist, it's too difficult. It's too difficult to put in their mind. It's such a difficult thing to accept, right? And like, that really puts a person in a bind, right? To believe the reality of that, right? And it's so much easier to just be like, no, that's all just hyperbolic nonsense. I'll just move on. You know, that can't possibly be true. Even though, like, literally, like, he's walking around saying Canada first. The Conservative Party is taking out ads in a paper owned by a literal racial purity cult. Like, the dog whistling tweets. It's, like, really, really obvious what's going on. So it's, but Canadians, you know, they can't hack that kind of stuff. They can't handle it. Uh-oh. My little puppy, he's getting caught in his reverse sneezing. I might have to bounce for a second, guys. If he comes back, I'm going to have to bounce. Hey, Juan Buchanan. I love that name. That's such a cool name. Am I pronouncing it right? Juan? Good to see you, man. I don't think I've ever seen you in here. Glad you're here. Most are working for psychopaths. I'm American, and most of our politicians make it obvious. Yeah, it's getting obvious, eh? Like, it's getting obvious. Okay, guys, give me 1 second. I gotta rescue my pup. Here, let me put on this fella. What a brilliant guy this
Remember,
is.
a couple months ago, there were many Republicans across the United States that decided that it would be a good idea to cut federal unemployment benefits in an effort to basically starve the unemployed population back into accepting some of these shitty, low-paid, no-benefit jobs. And basically, anybody with half a brain at that time, and listen, I don't like to brag about myself or anything, but I would consider myself to have at least half a brain, and we all predicted, because it was a very easy thing to predict, that this was going to backfire, that it wouldn't actually work in getting people back into the labor market, and it would do nothing but have a negative impact on those people, inflicting unnecessary suffering, basically at the expense of some of the most vulnerable people within society. So we have now been vindicated, and we have some data and evidence on this. So ending unemployment benefits had little impact on jobs and fueled $2 billion in spending cuts, study finds. So let's go ahead and read some of the details on this. So states that withdrew early from federal unemployment programs pushed few people back to work and fueled a nearly $2 billion cut in household spending, potentially hurting their local economies, according to new research. So 26 state governors, all Republican except for one of them, opted out of the pandemic-era program several weeks before their official expiration on Labor Day, and enhanced benefits were keeping the unemployed from looking for jobs and fueling a labor shortage, is what they were saying. And that bet seems to have had a limited payoff so far, according to a paper authored by economists and researchers at Columbia University, Harvard University, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and the University of Chicago, and the research was published on Friday. And the data suggests unemployment benefits aren't playing a big role in hiring challenges, and that other factors are having a larger impact. I wonder what some of those other factors may be. Could it be the fact that many of these billion-dollar profitable corporations are offering starvation wages to their potential employees? I don't know. Maybe that would have something to do with it. I'm not an economist, but apparently even the economists don't have any fucking idea what they're talking about. At least the Republican economists who decided that this would be a good idea. So states, just to give you a perspective on the actual real data here, so states that ended federal unemployment benefits early saw larger job gains among the unemployed. Their unemployment jumped 4.4 percentage points relative to jobless individuals in states that kept benefits flowing, according to the paper, which analyzed data through the first week of August. So a little bit of a jump there, right? 4.4 percentage. However, okay, and this is the reality of it, that translates to just 1 in 8 unemployed individuals in the cutoff states who found a job in that time period, and the majority, 7 out of 8, didn't find a new job. And we don't even know if that 1 in 8 that did find a new job found a job because they cut federal unemployment benefits. There's no reason to believe that that's even the case. So basically, this did absolutely nothing in terms of pushing people back into the workforce. It did basically nothing, okay? 7 out of 8 in these cutoff states did not find a new job. So all you ended up doing is causing pain and suffering to these people, these families, you go look at the data too. We saw an uptick in hunger at the time that they were cutting these unemployment benefits. So there are real world consequences to these types of things. And again, it doesn't even make sense from an economic perspective, because here's the real kicker. The unemployment dynamic, a loss of benefits without resulting job income for most people, led households to cut their weekly spending by 20%, according to the paper. And as a result, economies of the cutoff states saw a reduction of nearly $2 billion in consumer spending from June through the first week of August. Quote, they turned down federal transfers and that money didn't come back into the state from new job income, University of Toronto assistant professor Michael Stepner said, and he also co-authored the paper. A 20% spending cut amounts to a big reduction in quality of life for these households, which are largely lower income. So again, in other words, you basically decided to cut unemployment benefits, push people further into poverty. You didn't get anybody to go and get a job, right? Because this wasn't going to work from the beginning. We knew that it wasn't. And on top of that, you ended up losing your states billions of dollars in potential revenue. And again, they cut the federal unemployment benefits, okay? Federal, meaning it was allocated by the federal government and didn't cost them anything. So they basically turned away free money that then could have been given to people to go pay for basic life necessities and would have been injected straight back into their local economies. So not only did you cause unnecessary pain and suffering to the most vulnerable people in the country, but on top of that, you cost your states billions of dollars, okay? So even if you are a conservative conservative, even if you are a soulless capitalist and you don't care about the humanitarian consequences of enforcing a policy like this, then you should care about the economic consequences of a policy like this. So it's just wild to me that conservatives always like to joke about how, oh, well, leftists, they don't understand economics at all. Well, this is conservative economics, okay? It's trickle-down economics. That's the only thing that they know how to do. They cut taxes for the rich, and they cut benefits for the poor. They slash the social safety net, and they do everything that they can to inflict unnecessary pain and suffering on the most vulnerable people in the country. And at the end of the day, it doesn't even help economically.
Well, that I'm seeing this amongst leftists. It's still happening, and there's this fella that came through. Do I still have it open? Oh, come on, please tell me. Oh yeah, here it is. Here it is. This guy nails the truth. Okay, right here. This one's been going around. I showed it yesterday. I'm going to show it again today, and I'll show it again a couple of times, I wager. But this guy just nails it right on the head. Oop.
The help I'm getting in the comments. I really appreciate the help I'm getting in the comments from fellow progressives, economists, people who can do basic math. But I need you to accept something for me. Because it's only become clear to me in the last couple of years, and I think it's going to help you in your political discourse with your family members, with your coworkers, with your colleagues, your clients. Conservatives, by and large, don't care about the money. $10 a day childcare. I saw this 100 times in the comments there. Who's going to pay for this? Why should my tax dollars go to pay for that? And you can explain to them again and again and again and again and again that $10 a day childcare is going to save everybody money. You can explain it. You can explain that housing the homeless is cheaper. You can explain that safe injection sites save millions of dollars in healthcare money. You can explain it till you are red in the face. I've fucking done it. Deep down, these people don't give a fuck about the money. Fiscal conservatism, go fuck yourself. You don't give a fuck about the money. Then why? Good question. Great question. And I hope you're sitting down for this. Because they want women, disabled people, drug addicts, the homeless to suffer and to die in silence. And they're willing to pay money for it. They're willing to pay more in taxes. They're willing to pay more for healthcare. They're willing to pay more for housing, for public transport. They're willing to pay more and get less as long as it means that the people that they judge not worthy suffer. If you think I'm wrong, look around you. Just look. That's all you gotta do is look.
Yeah, he nails it, right? Like, and there is a word that we can use to describe this phenomenon that we are experiencing, and that word is evil, right? That the people who have power want to pay more. They want to pay more. Okay? Like, this is something that we have to, like what this gentleman said here, we need to accept, and we need to say openly and readily and calmly and dispassionately because it is the truth. It's simply the fact that the people who have power want others to suffer. The word that you use for this is evil. That evil is real. It exists in the society, such that the society exists. And the people who have power want other people to suffer. They want it to be this way. And they'll come up with every reason and every excuse and everything that they can find and every smokescreen they can use to shelter themselves underneath so that they don't have to face what is obviously the truth. That they want to pay more to keep people homeless. They want to pay more to keep people desperate. They want to do this. That's how they want the system to be structured. And until we grow up, because we're a very childish group of people, until we grow up and realize that the people who have power want to spend more to spread suffering, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to continue believing that we can negotiate with these people. And exactly as Juan said here, right? It's the rulers of our country are getting less and less hidden about it. They're becoming more obvious. They're getting less. They don't need to hide it any longer. They're becoming more and more sociopathic, obviously. They're becoming more and more psychopathic, obviously. They're becoming more and more evil, obviously. That their evil is being spread into the country and into the people, and it's obviously happening. It's obvious. And we are still walking around pretending like these evil psychopaths are actually going to negotiate with us in good faith. We're actually pretending as though the conservatives and the liberals in this country are negotiating with us in good faith. They're not. Their entire objective, from the ground to the sky, their entire objective is to deceive you into believing that you are part of a negotiation in the first place. There is no negotiation happening. That is not what's happening. You are being abandoned by an evil death cult that is plowing us towards an extinction event so that they can spend more of the money they claim to cherish in order to maximize suffering in the populace, so that you will continue doing all the work while they do nothing of value whatsoever. That's the situation that we are in. And if you think that we are not in that situation, then you are either complicit in the evil or completely delusional, and it's time to grow up. Right? It's time to grow up. And if we don't, well, then we're just going to get wiped out. Like, we're just going to get wiped out. And the level of evil that we are talking about in our country cannot be understated. It cannot be understated, the level of evil that we are talking about in Canada and America, right? There is actually no upper limit. We are talking about the same scale of evil as Voldemort, as Darth Vader, as Adolf Hitler, right? I actually make the argument that today's politicians are more evil than the Nazis, because even the Nazis weren't actively attempting to destroy the species. Should there be any survivors, the tales of misery and horror that we will tell of the politicians that were in power over our lifetimes will completely dwarf the horrors inflicted by Adolf Hitler and Mussolini in World War II. Absolutely. Donald Rumsfeld alone, right? Donald Rumsfeld alone. George W. Bush alone. Dick Cheney alone, right? Like, and the fact that our liberal government is putting like a pretty boy puppet in front of us while simultaneously pretending like they give a shit about these issues that they obviously don't, while they actively spend more money to ensure that this system of suffering continues, is evil. What other word can you use for it? What other word can you use for a people who don't even care about their own children? Because they don't. Like, they don't care about their own children. And once you realize the scale of their evil and their depravity, maybe then you'll actually do what must be done, which is to mobilize into the streets. That my largest critique of the leftist movement, such that it exists here in Canada, My largest critique of people like David Dole, people like Thought Slime, people like Lance from the Surfs, right? All these guys, is that they're not mobilizing people into the streets. And I'm very confused why that's the case. Some of these guys have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they're not even attempting to mobilize people into the streets. Like, literally someone like David Dole could set a date and just say, meet me here, this date, let's go. And thousands of people would go, and he doesn't do it. Why? And I think it's because they don't understand, they still think that we can negotiate with these evil psychopaths. They still think that we can defeat them with rational thinking and reasonable thought. These people are irrational psychopaths who don't even care about their own children. It's time to grow up, and it's time to realize that we've got to take to the streets. That's our only way. That's the only way forward at this point. And until we actually do that, we're just going to keep plunging ourselves into this apocalyptic death cult. On purpose, because that's the goal. Obviously, that's the goal. And I'm glad to see that there are more and more people that are waking up, that are growing up, and that are willing to say this. I'm so happy that this guy's video spread around. I hope one day I get one of my own. How you doing, Onward? How you doing, bud? You always come in at the best times, Onward. Your timing is always great. Yesterday, your timing was perfect. Hey, Chris, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while, bud. Good to see you, Chris. Hello, comrades. I just saw the CBC Facebook that they have turned off comments on political articles until after the election. Yeah, of course they have. Of course they have. Like, I mean, just the fucking ridiculous bullshit alone, right? Like, I don't know if there's anything particularly sinister on that. I just think that just the ridiculous bullshit alone. Well, and comment sections don't allow them to control the discourse so well, right? Like, and there's a lot of that going on. Hey, Ruth, how you doing? I don't think they all think that maybe they just aren't at this time able to do more. I don't know that I buy that anymore, Ruth. Like I am already going out and protesting already, and this channel doesn't pay my rent, right? This channel doesn't pay my rent, and I'm already organizing protests, right? I can throw these protests at these guys. They're never going to show up, right? Some of these guys live in Toronto. I think David Dole lives in Toronto. I think Lance lives in Toronto. They don't come, right? I can throw all this shit at them all day long. They don't talk about it. They don't come. They're not interested in mobilizing. They're interested in hiding behind their business. Because to them, this isn't a movement, it's a business. Just how this country isn't a society, it's a business, right? And as long as the business is paying out and paying their rent, they're just going to keep doing that. They're never going to mobilize their people. They're never actually going to get out onto the street. They're never actually going to do anything, right? They're going to report if my protest movement suddenly has thousands of people coming to it, they'll sit behind their safe screen and they'll report on it. That's what they'll do, right? Yeah, I don't think that the CBC really want to hear what people have to say. Well, and they certainly don't want people realizing notice how the media is just completely not talking at all about, like, hey, 92% of Canadians think that there should be a tax on the wealthy, and neither the Conservatives or the Liberals are offering that. 92%. There's super majority consensus on this issue, right? That's not even a political issue anymore. That's not even a leftist issue anymore. That's like a non-political issue now. Like, if literally everybody in super majority numbers, 92% of your society thinks that something should happen, then that's not a promise for a politician to give on the left or the right or anything like that. That is a mandate for the political class to do. That's what that is, right? You're not having a debate anymore, right? There's not a negotiation on this. that if 92% of the population wants to see taxes raised on the wealthy, then whoever is in power should just do it. They should just do it. And not because it's popular, or not because it's like gonna score them political points or any of that kind of stuff, although it would, but because it's what the people want, and that's what they're supposed to do. That's their job, right? But it's not happening. And why is it not happening? Because the people who are in power are evil, right? Going back to this guy. They want to pay more to spread suffering. They're not going to do things to help people. They're evil. Maybe, but maybe priorities are different. David just had a kid. Everything changes after your first child. Well, that's what's confusing. Like, I would think that if you had a kid, you would be more willing to mobilize, right? Like, I'm never going to critique any of these guys on their political points or political perspectives or anything like this. Like, we have a discussion, I'm sure. But I'm never going to do a video being like, David Dole says. Like, I actually hate that shit. I think that that's just boring capitalist neoliberal garbage. I think that's you just focusing on your business and not your movement, right? That, oh man, Jimmy Dore said that about Sam Cedar, and oh, it gets 1 million clicks, and oh my goodness, and like, oh, it's at the ad revenue and all this, right? Like, I think that that's boring. I think that's like a boring dystopia bullshit. Like, what I will critique these guys on is their seriousness about actually moving the society forward and actually doing what has to be done in order to do it, right? Like, David Dole should be part of a large street-based movement. Shouldn't be hiding behind his camera, acting like a reporter, right? Like, that's done. Like, that's fucking done. We don't live in a society. We live in a business. We don't live in a society. We don't need reporters, right? We need fucking people on the streets. We need, what do they call it? Activists, I guess, right? We need people actually fighting, and we need people actually on the street. And somebody like David Dole could do it. He's not gonna, because he's more interested in his business than the movement. And should this, like, and as long as they let him sit there and be like, oh man, it's a shame. Oh man, oh, disgraceful, right? That's David Dole's role in this. Oh man, disgraceful. Oh, right? They'll happily let him keep doing that as long as he stays behind his screen, as long as he doesn't mobilize people onto the streets, right? As long as he just keeps paying his rent with his YouTube channel and not actually paying any fucking attention whatsoever. And yeah, I hope David Dole sees this. I hope that somebody shows this to David Dole. Because straight up, this is a challenge to all these leftists, man. I don't give a shit. I'm not going to debate you on politics. I'm not one of these stupid lefties who's like going to go after your stupid like technicality point and let's break and all this kind of stuff. I'm just saying that you're not interested in the movement. Not really. Like, you're not interested in the movement. You're just interested in the business. You're making your money doing what you're doing, and you're never going to move it any farther than that. And that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge. You want to actually be a leftist? You want to actually be a leftist? You want to be a real leftist, right? Well, fucking, you got to get on the streets and you got to mobilize your people. And if you're not going to do that, then you're not really a leftist. You're just a fucking reporter. That's it. You're just a fucking reporter. And we got plenty of those, right? So keep shaking your head, David. Keep going like, oh, disgraceful, despicable. And we'll forget about you when you're gone, just like we forget about all these fucking reporters, because we got plenty of reporters, right? We need people mobilizing onto the street, and that's the challenge. Gauntlet dropped. I hope I get like 10,000 subscribers and I can start saying this shit to these guys. It's like, come on. Like, come on. Like, somebody like David Dole has 400,000 subscribers. Like, come the fuck on. Trudeau just put out something about taxing banks. Who gives a fuck? Which is what the article I saw on Facebook was about. I would never believe liberals will do it. And it's such a pander. Even if he did do it, who gives a fuck? Right? We are talking about taxing the wealth away from the billionaire class so that they don't have billions of dollars. We are talking about a massive structural change in how Canada operates as a society. We are talking about eliminating the wealth inequality. We are talking about structurally ensuring that it can never happen again. We are talking about creating an actual society, right? Not this fucking dumb business we've got. And the Liberals putting a tax on banks, who gives a fuck? Like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to David Thompson. That doesn't matter to Galen Weston. That doesn't matter to the Irvings. That doesn't matter to the Pattisons. That doesn't matter to Joseph Tsai. That doesn't matter to any of these guys, right? Oh, they put a tax on the bank. Okay, who gives a fuck, right? And if you're a dumb liberal being like, oh, you've got to put a tax on the bank, that's the same thing. All you're doing is just admitting how stupid you are, right? Like, and it's just like, I'm just over it, man. Like, let's actually get some shit done. Let's see these guys actually do something. And right now, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing any of this fucking shit. All I'm seeing is a bunch of pandering and delusion making. Here's a great segue into this, which is, here we go. Okay. Cheap money, shortages, investors and crime, the making of Canada's housing crisis. There's an article, there's a headline that grabs you, right? Cheap money, shortages, investors and crime, the making of Canada's housing crisis. Comes from Global News, okay? So, basic premise, right? You set it up, telling us all the shit we already know, right? The housing market is fucked. Okay, but how did Canada's crippling housing woes get to be that way in the first place? While there is no single or simple explanation, here's a look at some of the main factors. And what's the main one that they're going to put in front of us? What's the first one that they're going to focus on? Because we all know everybody goes and reads the full article every single time. What's the first thing? Fucking low mortgage rates is the first thing. What's the second thing? Canada's not building enough homes. Oh, I set this up because I misremembered this completely wrong. Using homes as an investment. Come on, no. That's not how this went. I fucking set this up so well. You guys. Ugh, the first thing they talk about is fucking immigration. I fucked this all up. I'm so mad. I had a good roll going on. It was going to be so good. I was going to hit it. And you guys are going to be like, whoa. Everything was going to be so awesome. And then I fucked it all up and everything's terrible. I think this might even be the wrong fucking article. Oh, John. Okay, moving on. Fuck. Okay. So, the first thing they talk about, one of the major things that the media has been talking about is immigration, right? Which I'm very scared of this. I'm very scared that the media is talking about immigration as if it's like, oh, the problem with the housing market are all the brown people coming over from the countries that we bomb, right? Just like, oh yeah, we go over there, we bomb some countries, and then we get a whole bunch of refugees, and they're the ones that are causing the problem. Sound familiar? Sound like a familiar tactic, right? Even this, though, low mortgage rates. So the problem is that too many people can buy houses. So this is the same strategy as blaming individuals for climate change, right? Yeah, the problem isn't systemic. The problem isn't like a big systemic factor. The problem is that everybody can just borrow free money easily, right? And so every individual is doing that. That's the problem. Forget about the fact that even within the article itself, and then of course Canada isn't building enough homes. Oh yeah, this is where they blame the immigrants, right? While national borders have been closed to most immigrants in March 2020, right? Data from immigration shows, net immigration accounted for 80% of the country's population growth, which is great because no one's having kids, right? The population growth amongst people who actually live here is essentially zero. So if we didn't have immigration, we wouldn't have population growth. Not really. Not really. Because this capitalist system is such a failure and it's grinding us into the earth so badly that people aren't having kids. Right? They're not having kids to fucking replace themselves. We would be in a population decline if it wasn't for the immigration stats, because this capitalist system exhausts us so much and is a complete failure. Ugh. But then finally, so you go down all this way, using homes as an investment, right? Investors accounted for 20%. Investors accounted for 20% of property purchases in Canada. Oh, so assholes with lots of money, right, buy up the property as much as 20%. 1 in 5 homes that are built, 1 in 5 homes that exist that went on the market were bought by just some asshole with money who is speculating on your market. But we're going to front load this article with immigration. That's what we're going to do. We're going to blame the immigrants, and we're going to scapegoat the immigrants first, right down at the bottom in the space that nobody actually fucking reads. We're going to point out, oh, by the way, 1 in 5 houses are actually bought by fucking rich bastards who have no intention of actually using them. Right? It's just goddamn What do you think would happen to housing prices if 20% of the houses in the market suddenly just came onto the market? Right? If we said to these investors, fuck off, get fucked, use it or lose it, what do you think would happen to housing prices? Right? What do you think? This idea that housing prices are losing their minds because there's too many immigrants. Housing prices are losing this mind because individuals are borrowing more than ever. Or, crazy thought, maybe it's because fucking 20% of the houses are being bought by investors, and that's jacking up the house prices all by itself as a supply and demand. But also, the people who are selling know that there are these investors in the market. And they know that these investors are willing to outbid. And they know. So if I'm selling my house for $1 million, but I know the house in the market is actually worth like 1.2, well, I'm going to put it on the market for 1.4. And some like lawyer or some kind of doctor, engineer, who's sacrificed his whole life in order to actually get this idea of having a house, well, I'm going to tell him to get fucked. And I'm going to go tell the billionaire who's buying up houses as an investment opportunity, here you go. Like, get totally fucked. Like, get totally fucked about this blaming immigrants bullshit. Get fucked. Yeah, they typically have very sophisticated ways to try and extract more value, right? And then finally, you get down to the real bottom, using homes to launder dirty money, right? Here's a new aspect on it. For example, estimating that money laundering makes home prices in the province between 3.7 and 7.5% higher than they would otherwise be. Literally criminals using the housing market in order to launder their ill-gotten gains. Like, and nobody in government gives a shit about this because they're part of it, right? Because they're part of it. And what are the big things that these guys are offering, right? You go and you find, here you go. Trudeau's housing crisis proposals won't keep prices from rising, experts say. Why? It's extremely, extremely straightforward. You can build 100 million homes if you like. You can build 1 billion homes. Build as many fucking homes as you want. Build 5 times the amount of housing that we have population. None of that fucking matters because billionaires are buying the houses. Like, I don't think, why is this so difficult for people to understand, right? That people who for the last 40 years have been walking around being like, yeah, it's basic supply and demand, can't put together basic supply and demand when it comes to having fucking billionaires in your society. That the billionaires, if you build 1 million homes, that means that the billionaires are going to buy 1 million homes. That they're not going to sell those homes to you. Who gives a fuck about you, right? You're not part of the deal, right? I am buying this house so that I can have the asset. And once the economy collapses, then at least I've got this house. And I don't give a fuck if you die on the street. That's fine by me. I'm a psychopath, right? That's who's running this place. We've just had a big discussion about this. And so the liberals and the conservatives are walking around saying, we're going to resolve this crisis by building a whole bunch of houses is pointless. It's completely and utterly pointless. The only way that you're actually going to address this housing crisis is if you confront capital. Is if you say to the capitalists, nope, you don't get these. Period. Full stop. You don't get them. That's done. And if you're not willing to say that, then you're not actually solving the problem. And you know you're not. Right? You know you're not. Like, this is extremely easy to figure out. This is extremely easy to figure out. And, like, the people who aren't figuring it out are the same people who can't figure out that putting a mask in front of your face protects you from COVID. Like, and there's lots of those people around. Hopefully less as time moves forward. And hopefully that happens soon. But insofar as this election goes, it's kind of a wash, right? Like, the Conservatives are going to gain a few seats, the Liberals are going to lose a few seats, the NDP are going to gain some seats, and we're going to be back in the same fucking position with, like, a minority government that's faffing around, not actually giving a shit about anything. And you wait. Watch what happens, man. Watch what happens. We're gonna get this liberal minority government, and then the Liberals are gonna enact policies of austerity on us with the help of the Conservatives. That the alliance that exists between these two parties is going to become obvious and overt to anybody but like the most gullible rube that exists, which in my view is about 60% of the populace. Okay, I need to calm down. It's song time. If you guys haven't heard me play this song before, this is a song that I made up that I call the Care Bear Stare Against the Capitalist Death Cult. It's a lovely piece that these capitalists can't do anything about, and if everybody starts singing it, they're fucked. This is called Antarctica is Covered in Ice. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes to sweep me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? When everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice. And everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know that we can do it. I know that we can do it. Because the solutions that we are facing, the problems that we are facing, have easy solutions. That's the most comically absurd part of all of this, is that the problems that we are facing in our society not only have easy solutions, they are solutions that other places have already tried and done and been successful. Finland took its homeless people and put them into houses and saved a bunch of money. We watched it happen. We know it's real. It is no longer a theory. It is a fact. We watched it occur. And it was easy. They did it quickly. We could give food to the hungry. It would be easy to do. That we can stop this climate change catastrophe that is right in front of us. And all we have to do in order to do it is stop. Deal with the consequences of stopping. Secure the food that we need. Use the fossil fuels as we need to produce the food we need so we don't have famines and starve. And stop. Turn the billboards off in Times Square. Turn the billboards off in Yonge and Dundas. Turn all of this superfluous garbage off. Just stop. And when we stop, we will stand back in awe and wonder and watch as the earth heals itself. That we don't need to invent a technology. We don't need to create something. We don't need to do any of that. This place was a garden before we got here. The earth wants to be a garden. And if we want to be around for the earth to heal itself and become the glorious garden it once was, all we have to do is stop. Well, I made it through all that without crying for once. Look at that. We're all growing. We're all growing. Onward. I'm thinking about writing a song called I Ain't Seen a Lightning Bug in Years, and I Live in a Shack, and I'm One of the Lucky Ones. That's quite a title, bud. That's quite a title. I look forward to hearing it. Maybe not as optimistic as yours. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Onward, one of the things that I think, in terms of the flooding, there's a difference between, optimism and acknowledging what is real, right? Like, one of the big things that really helped me with this climate change catastrophe was actually going, flood, this is a great one. was actually going to... There's many flooding maps that you can see. And this will actually be useful for you, Onward, because we've been talking a lot about Florida, right? How Florida is fucked. We all agree with that, right? So this is what the map looks like right now. This is what it looks like. I mean, you want to see real disaster, you're actually going to Louisiana, right? This is what Louisiana looks like if the water levels go up even 1 meter, right? Boink. It's toast, right? Before, after. Like, it's toast. That's complete decimation, right? If it goes up 5 meters, it's done. You can't live in New Orleans. It's over, right? Like, we go down to Florida, take it up a meter, right? You're seeing effects all along the way. Take it up to 5, right? Very serious stuff happening in Florida. But here's the thing, and this is something I got to remind everybody and remind myself, right? Let's take it up 60 meters. That's as high as it can go in this particular chart, right? So you got mass devastation along the coasts, without a doubt, right? But, you know, the rest of the place is okay. So you, my friend, in Atlanta, you're perfectly safe. Except all the Floridians. You're going to get a big influx of Floridians. For sure. Get ready for it, bud. Get ready for it. Goddamn, I love singing that song, man. I love singing that song. It puts me in such a good mood to sing that song. It feels good to sing. I love getting that message out there. I have a vision in my head that one day I'll sing that song in public in front of a big group of people, and they'll be happy to be there, and they'll be happy to hear me sing. I hope it happens one day. I hope it happens one day. Other good news, right, on the climate change front. So Senegalese farmers are on their way to building their own Great Wall, but theirs comes with a twist. It will be completely green. So these are farming circles that, no, it's not aliens, right? We don't have crop circles landing down in the middle of these Senegalese deserts. This is part of a larger project that is happening throughout Africa, where they are planting gardens known as Touloucourt, are the most recent incarnation of the Great Green Wall Project. They were designed by Ali, forgive my pronunciation of this, Ndai, I definitely did that wrong, a Senegalese agricultural engineer who couldn't leave Senegal when the borders were closed. So this is the plan, to put it all along the Sahara Desert, because as we know, right, head to Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps, everybody loves the Sahara Desert, enormous desert system, right? This is a major crisis for Africa, and it's been this way for decades. That the Sahara Desert is encroaching, that it is moving through, and it is completely possible that Africa will turn into the Middle East, and they know it. They know it, and they're watching it happen. And so they're doing everything they can, this being a major initiative in order to prevent this. And one of the great, brilliant things about this, but you might wonder why they're planted in a circular pattern. The reason is that circular beds allow roots to grow inwards. This traps liquids and bacteria and enhances water retention and composting. So they're designing this stuff in order to greenify and push the Sahara Desert back. And initiatives like this absolutely work. They absolutely work. China is doing big initiatives like this. You can see they also have a big desertified. There's a region in China that has been called the Sea of Death. It's a desert area in China called the Sea of Death. Here, hold on one second. My puppy is losing his mind. What's up, puppy? What's up? And the Sea of Death is beginning to recede and is actually beginning to greenify because the Chinese are planting trees there, right? And so, like, these kinds of initiatives are not only completely doable, right? They're not only completely doable, they're not expensive to do, right? And if we can do these sorts of things on the scale that the Africans are doing, right, while the Africans are like fairly poor, like relatively speaking, between the Canadians and the United States and the African nations, we're much wealthier. We have a lot more wealth going on, mainly because we stole it, right? Mainly because we stole it, but we've got it. And if the Africans can do such a project, right? If the Africans can plant all of this stuff and create a green wall in order to prevent the spread of the Sahara Desert, we can do the exact same. We can do the exact same thing. We're not, right? Trudeau likes to talk a big game about how he planted 1 million trees, and like when you actually take a look at like the reality of what that means, that's a drop in the bucket. It's almost meaningless. Hey, Demand Better, how you doing? These stories make me feel better about our chances to fight climate change once we start to properly invest in them. Love tree walls. Africans are at the forefront of agricultural innovation right now, which makes sense, and it does make sense. The African nations, in my view, like my hope for Africa, and there is some rumblings of this. It's not overwhelming, but there are talks about federating. That a lot of these, especially the countries that are involved in this project, right? Like this is exactly how you build like federated bodies, and this is exactly how you create a series of agreements, and you create an arrangement with nations to create like a federal government that has sort of jurisdiction throughout, while still allowing like states' rights to exist. Of course, the Americans will not be happy to see that. The Americans don't want the African nations to buddy up and actually federate. So they're doing everything they can politically and militarily, honestly, to prevent that from happening. And especially as Biden pivots to Somalia. Yet to see any really good articles on this, but like this is 100% what he's doing. He's definitely pivoting into Somalia. And it's for good reason in terms of like the imperial power structure. He wants to pivot to Somalia because a lot of support is given to Yemen through Somalia, right? That these pirates that operate out of Somalia are operating on behalf of the Yemenis, right? I think they should federate to better combat large-scale problems and increase their bargaining power vis-a-vis the West and China. Yeah. Oh yeah, again, like the number one reason the Americans don't want them to do it, right? Increasing their bargaining power against the Americans, no thanks, right? The Americans want to deal with these guys on a one-to-one basis. They want to try and pit like Nigeria against Chad. They want to try to pit Angola against Zambia, right? They want to arm rebels in Angola to go into Zambia and cause problems for the government there. They want to arm troops in the DRC to go into Uganda, right? That's how the Americans roll in Africa. They don't want to see some kind of federated body that's going like, hey, no, you can't sell arms to Angola, right? And to have like Zambia, the DRC, and like all these guys be like, yeah, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing, step bro? Like they're not interested in that arrangement, right? Like the Americans are going to do everything they can to try to ensure that doesn't happen. Same story here in South America, that Peru, Venezuela, I believe Ecuador and Bolivia and Chile are all talking to one another about creating a federated body, right? And if Brazil switches over to Lula while they're doing that, Lula might actually get involved in that. And so create like this big conversation on the continent about, hey, maybe we should federate, right? The United States does not want to see that. The United States doesn't want to see a federated South America. They want to continue destroying and exploiting this place. That's what the Americans want to do. They should keep regional currencies, though, boost local commerce and production, as well as gain extra MMT benefits. I'm kind of to a point that I'm just like, whatever works, bud. Like, whatever works, right? Like, I'm not like an economic purist. this is the funny thing about economics, is that like we've spent so much of our time living in this kind of neoliberal fantasy land that we don't actually know that much about the subject of economics. That like what we are facing now is less learning economics and more unlearning the religious ideology that we were taught, neoliberalism, right? That neoliberalism isn't an economic system, it's a religious ideology. And so we're all spending like most of our time these days dismantling the structures that have existed and the lies that exist in the populace because of this 40-year brainwashing of this, religious ideology of a death cult. And we're just now starting to be like, hey, maybe we should actually learn economics, right? Maybe we should actually learn economics. And I'm not talking about like just the populace. I'm talking about like Richard Wolff said it the best. Like, this is the moment that I realized that the United States is economically illiterate. It was when he said he received his PhD in Harvard and never once was he required to read Karl Marx. If you don't know Karl Marx, you're economically illiterate. Like, you are an illiterate. You don't understand the subject of economics. And if you are, especially if you're espousing this failed neoliberal ideology as an economic system, then you really don't understand economics. Like, you really don't understand economics. That all you're attempting to do is turn your society into a business, which here in the West has been completely successful. Like, we're not a society. We're just a business. Onward says, I fear the blob and neocon fifis have been hurt and we're going to get pushed into another war. Yeah, I think that's pretty likely, actually. Right now, it's just big question marks about, like, is it going to be just a redeploy into, like, Syria? I think generally that you're going to see big offensives and big actions happening in this region because the Americans now are going into a reconsolidation period, right? Like, why are they there in the first place? Well, they're there to increase Israel's influence in the world, right? Like, that's 100% why they are in this region at all. It's to ensure that Israel is secure, that going into Afghanistan and going into Iraq and going into Syria have been defensive measures, because there are military forces in the Middle East that explicitly want to destroy Israel. Like, that, it's an explicit statement. Like, think back to the we all remember the Arab Spring. Oh, 1 second, guys, excuse me. Ugh. Sorry, I hate itching my nose on stream, but it's just like, for some reason I feel like I'm breathing like itchy things. Like, it's just like, I don't have allergies or anything, but that kind of feels like what it is. Maybe I'm getting allergies. Oh, God, I hope not. Anyway. When the Arab Spring happened, right? Well, what happened? The Egyptian people stood up, overthrew their ruler, right? Held an election. Who won? The Muslim Brotherhood won, right? The Muslim Brotherhood, who literally in their top 3 policy platforms says we want to destroy Israel, right? So the United States military came in, deposed them, installed their own leadership in Egypt, and but that sentiment still exists. The Muslim Brotherhood exists in Egypt. It exists in Saudi Arabia. It certainly exists in Yemen and Oman, right? Like, it exists in Iraq and it exists in Iran. This, like, if you live in this region, you know what's happening in Israel. You're well aware of what's going on the Gaza Strip. You're well aware of what Israel is, which is a military base for the United States. And you know that there are nuclear bombs there, right? And so if you're the United States, like, big reason why you're in this region and why you will never leave, right? Like, they can afford to leave Afghanistan because Afghanistan is essentially rubble, right? That Afghanistan, like, they bombed everything. Like, there's nothing there, right? There's nothing in Afghanistan any longer. It's just been bombed to shit. So why bother? It's going to take them 20 years to rebuild. Like, so while they're rebuilding, right, you can focus closer to home, which is Israel. And you can keep troops in Iraq, keep troops in Syria, right? Continue the oppression of Jordan, continue dismantling any power structures that exist here, continue working with Saudi Arabia, continue negotiating with them, continue oppressing the Muslim Brotherhood in Yemen, continue destroying the Somali pirates who are attempting to alleviate this suffering in Yemen, right? Continue the war front on this because it's all about Israel. It's all about maintaining Israel and getting into the Greater Israel Project, right? Greater is, like, this is extremely well known. It's never talked about in any policy circles or anything I pay attention to. This is the Greater Israel Project. This is what the United States have envisioned for Israel. That they want this whole land here to be taken over officially by Israel. This is like a multi-generational project, of course. But step one, destroy its neighbors, right? Make it so that they literally cannot fight back. Install your own governments, have them cede power to Israel, expand the borders, right? The takeover of the Suez Canal, in my view, is the most important part. Like, taking over the Suez Canal, extending this border so it cuts right through here, right? Cuts Egypt off from the Suez Canal so that this is under American control. Yeah, very important. Very important. The conservatives who are against war under Trump have proven to be so disingenuous and easily whipped up by the media. Yeah, I mean, nobody even really knows what they're saying, right? Like, it literally is just like a displacement of their anxiety. That's it. That they've been living in this sort of dream world where they genuinely believe, and I think the Americans do genuinely believe this. They genuinely believe that they should be able to go into any country they like, cleanse it, and then install whatever system they like, and they expect the citizens there to be grateful, right? Like, that's the kind of manic fever dream that Americans are deluding themselves with. And so the withdrawal from Afghanistan proves explicitly that that didn't work, right? And so, but confronting the reality that they've been living in this delusional fantasy, that can't be done, right? And so it fills them with this anxiety and fear and angst that they have to put somewhere. And so where are they putting it? Oh, Joe Biden! Joe Biden is the one that did this. Certainly it has nothing to do with years and years of cultural distortion, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that our culture is a complete failure. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that our culture is an abomination, is a barbarian state. It has nothing to do with the white supremacist nation that we are. It has absolutely nothing to do with the failures of on this deep systemic level. Joe Biden! We were going to win that thing, Joe Biden, right? And it would have been the same if Trump had pulled out. It would have been this. It wouldn't have mattered. It would have been exactly the same. Everybody would have shook their fists and been like, "Oh, it was that guy that time, that one thing that happened. Oh, that one thing. Grumble." And then it'll become a slogan, because this is what the Americans do. They create a slogan of some sort, right? And then that slogan just gets attached to that person, and then they just use that slogan. Yeah, Chapo was right. We're losers. They don't want to feel bad. Concern for women and children is just an excuse. Yeah, that's just like some... That's not that much different, in my view, than like a liberal walking by a homeless person and going, "Aw," and then doing fucking nothing. And then voting to keep it this way, right? Like, it's just a way for them to feel better about themselves, right? That instead of facing the mirror and saying, we destroyed this fucking place for nothing. We destroyed lives of our own citizens. We certainly destroyed the lives of the Afghani people. Instead of looking in the mirror and actually acknowledging that truth, you can just sort of tilt your head and be like, oh, but the women and children. Oh, those women are being oppressed now. Things were so much better when we were there. Things were so much better. The women were freer. Women got to be free in Afghanistan when we weren't there, right? And because when you bomb people's houses, it doesn't matter, right? Like that. Like genuinely, the conversation is this: is it worse for a woman to be a subclass in a society at peace, or is it better for a woman to be equal while having her houses bombed by an oppressive military? Which one do you want? Because those are the options that are on the table right now, right? And then I take it even further, right? That a country at war can never reform itself because the primary objective of all people involved in the war is to survive the war. So you can never actually reform it. You can never actually create anything permanent or new or change the culture or anything, right? So even if your imperial forces allowed women to like walk around without burqas and like there was like some kind of equality that you allowed to have within the slave state that you were inflicting on them, right? Well, they would never actually reform themselves, so that was permanent, right? Whereas a society at peace might be following these barbaric practices, if you want to call it that. I shouldn't say that. Sorry, that's a stupid thing to say. I recant. I immediately retract that. It is barbaric to make women a subclass. Absolutely. Like that's that. You got to face that. That's real. Like the Taliban isn't walking around like as like princes and poets and shit, right? Like they are subjugating women. They are doing that. We have to admit it. But only a society at peace can reform itself, right? And you can't inflict the reform from outside, right? And if your reform is so good, then you just gotta make it look good, right? But you listen to these Afghani people talk about like the feminist movement. They got some question marks about it. Like, it's not like we're over here having a good time. It's not like the men and women are all joining hands with one another in harmony, right? It's not like we're all happy with one another, right? Like it's not like we're getting along over here, right? So, I mean, if America genuinely wants to create an argument that says that the Afghanistan country should reform itself, then it needs to A, leave it the fuck alone, right? Just needs to leave it the fuck alone, and then B, set an example. But we're not very good at doing either of those things. And so this whole like pandering to like, oh, but the women and children, it's total fucking bullshit. It's just a way for us to maintain our white supremacy and our superiority, right? Oh, we're better than them. Oh, sure, we lost this war, but we're still better, right? Because you can't view the Afghani people as equals to us because they're not white, right? They are always intrinsically beneath us. So moving into vaccine news. Vaccines not enough to stop fourth wave of COVID-19 in Canada, experts warn. This is a major problem. Yeah, it blows their minds that everybody doesn't want to be like us. Exactly. Canadians need to use all public health tools available, including masking, physical distancing, and testing, to avoid lockdowns and protect the unvaccinated as a fourth wave of COVID grips the country, infectious disease experts say. We can't ignore that there are literally millions of people in Ontario and Canada that are unvaccinated, says Dr. Isaac Bogach, an infectious disease specialist and a member of Ontario's vaccine task force. Even if all eligible Canadians got their shots, there would still be nearly 5 million Canadians who are not eligible to be vaccinated, who would be at heightened risk, especially as the more transmissible Delta variant takes hold. We'll do okay if we can limit the pace of community transmission, but that's tough to do. If we get a lot of people get infected in a shorter period of time, that could happen with the Delta variant. We will put pressure on our healthcare system. We will stretch our healthcare system. There are literally millions of people that can get infected. With millions of people still at risk of infection, and many of them children, Barack said that Canadians should use all tools available to protect the unvaccinated in order to avoid more full-scale lockdowns. And it's important to remember, like, really pay attention to what the media is doing here. We have never once had a lockdown in this country. We've never once had a full-scale lockdown. It's never happened one time. People have still worked through the lockdowns. People go out of their house, they get on the TTC, they go to work, they work with all those people, they go back out, they get on the TTC, they come home. What do you think is happening? What do you think is happening? Like, sure, things have been restricted, right? Things have been restricted, but there's never been a full-scale lockdown. That's never happened, right? Because a full-scale lockdown would absolutely destroy the capitalist system by itself, right? That the capitalist system can't actually respond rationally to the needs and the demands of the populace. And so what do? We say that what we've done is a full-scale lockdown, right? And by saying that what we've done is a full-scale lockdown, we are tacitly admitting that we will never lock down more than this, right? We will never do what needs to be done. We will never actually lock down in a manner that actually eliminates this problem, right? While other countries have and have been successful. So to me, this is one of the biggest propaganda grifts that the media has run on us, is convincing us that we have ever experienced a full-scale lockdown, that we ever did. No, we didn't. We've done some restrictions. We've certainly pulled back. Like, that's, you can't argue that. It's not a lockdown, right? It never has been, never was. COVID spreads when people had dinner with friends, not because they're going to work. Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly, because COVID can't go on buses. COVID can't go on subways. That's not part of it, right? As soon as when you cross the railing, right? When you take your little card and you press it and you go beep and you cross the railing, COVID can't go through there, right? That's what's going on. Like, it's lunacy upon lunacy upon lunacy upon lunacy, right? And we're just going to plow into this Delta variant. And so herd immunity no longer possible without vaccinating young children, Public Health Ontario says. So much for herd immunity. That's gone, right? We're not going to do that. Achieving herd immunity against COVID-19 will not be possible without an approved vaccine for children under 12. Due to increased transmissibility and partial vaccine escape ability of the Delta variant, now dominant in the world, the report says the percentage of the population requiring a vaccine to hit a point where the virus transmission enters long-term decline now exceeds the number of people actually medically eligible for vaccination at this time. Yep. So much for the herd immunity, right? And then we even have this is from the Star editorial board. Now, why you know that's extremely serious is that the Star is owned by people who donated to the Doug Ford campaign, right? The people who own the Star, and ostensibly the Star editorial board, are people who donated to Doug Ford's campaign. And these guys are saying Ford is sleepwalking Ontario into a rising COVID wave again. Right? Enough is enough. Where is Premier Doug Ford? No, it's a federal election, right? So Doug Ford's got to go away. Can't remind people what a fucking conservative actually looks like, right? Notice how there's no news on Doug Ford. Notice how there's no news on Kenny. Notice how that's all gone away during this election cycle, right? Because you can't remind people what a fucking conservative actually looks like. We've had conservatives in power. We know what it looks like, right? It's always a disaster. It's always a clown show. They're not interested in governing. And yet, here we are. Here we are. And so, the reality is, what it always is that capitalists are willing to sacrifice your life for their profits. If you die because of COVID, they don't give a fuck, right? Like, Doug Ford is cutting services, is cutting healthcare services in the middle of this pandemic. Like, they don't give a fuck at all. They don't care one little bit. They're going to send your kids back to school. You're going to see an enormous spike in cases, right? And then they're going to say, oh, let's lock down, and they're not going to lock down. Like, we'll never see a lockdown because they're calling what we're doing now a full-scale lockdown. It's fucking ridiculous. Hey, John Wick, how you doing, bud? John, Uber app glitched tonight, and drivers were given $300 plus dollars for deliveries that normally pay $5. I think it was hacked. Great. Good. Fuck these guys. Fuck these guys. I hope it was hacked. I hope we get a group of people who claim it. I hope we get like another anonymous movement, right? I'd love to start reporting on that. I'd love to start reporting on some like anonymous movement or some kind of guy that was going around hacking people and fucking my mom. Fuck all these guys. Fuck all these guys. I'm 100% on the side of these like Robin Hood style hackers, should they exist. Yeah, some hacker maybe wanted to give the poor Uber driver some of that CEO's money. Haha, way to go. I hope so, dude. I fucking hope so. I genuinely hope so. I will always be on the side of Robin Hood. Like, I genuinely think that the people who are in power are evil. Like, I don't think that they're misunderstanding the situation. I think they're well aware of what the situation looks like. And I think they're choosing to abandon us on purpose, right? So they're evil. So anybody wants to rob these guys as stagecoaches, anybody wants to cause them problems, and then like woo their daughters away from them, anybody that wants to do that kind of shit, form a band of merry men who are going to go and cause problems for these guys' businesses, rob from the rich, give even to themselves. I don't give a fuck. Great. I'm on board, and I'll report it, and I'll be completely favorable to Robinhood. I'll be completely favorable to these hackers because these sociopaths that run this place can go fuck themselves and die. Hey, Misty, how you doing? What happened to Anonymous anyway? I haven't heard much from them lately. They got a big score. I can't remember exactly what the story was, but they got some kind of big score where they actually took someone down. And then this led to like a full-scale investigation of Anonymous, and a lot of them were outed. None of them went to prison or anything like that because everything they did was actually legal. And of course I will gladly be corrected because I'm just speaking from like memory bank from like way long ago. But because a lot of them got outed, like a lot of them got doxxed by like the FBI and the CIA, because of that, the power of Anonymous is that they're anonymous, right? The power of that group is that you don't know who's doing it. But like once the CIA knows who these guys are, like you're not going to be able to hack into some kind of system or anything like that while the CIA's actively watching you, right? So they just can't do it anymore. And it's pretty much that straightforward, right? Like the CIA doxed them and has got people watching them, and like we all know about the DSA the NSA spying program. Like that's definitely part of it. It's definitely part of it. I hope you guys are all doing really well out there. I hope you guys are having a good time. It's what a hot day I'm having, man. What a hot day. It's like 28 degrees. You can hear the cicadas. They're just screaming away. They're like, ah! I genuinely wish that I could do this. Don't you wish that you could just walk outside and just start screaming? You just, ah! And everybody would just kind of look at you. Like maybe they would join in. Wouldn't that be a great cultural thing to create? Like just have like a minute of screaming, right? Every day at like 5 p.m. everybody leaves, or instead of having like a moment of silence, it's like a moment of screaming. Just everybody's just like, ah! I think we'd all really like that, actually. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be great. So now we're getting into kind of the more random stuff here as we get into the final hour. It's been nearly a month since Cori Bush photo op at the Capitol. People are still being evicted. None of rent or mortgage has been canceled. Just Dems have been on vacation just like everyone else and haven't lifted a finger to do anything about the flimsy ban expiring in weeks. Next month, when they come out with some more grandstanding and ask for something like universal suitcases for millions of families that will inevitably be evicted, can I call them insidious status quo defenders? Or should I just be grateful for the scraps again because they're trying? That's a good point, Onward. Who is stopping me? Who is stopping me from just like going out and just screaming my head off? Well, I guess that's what this whole channel is about, right? Gotta save my energy to scream my head off on this channel, right? Can I just say, guys, I am so grateful that you guys are here. Sometimes I start this stream and there's always the worry that exists inside of me that I'm gonna start the stream and no one's gonna come. No one's going to pop in, no one's going to talk to me, no one's going to be here, that it's just going to be me talking to myself. And that's just never been the case. There's always been somebody to talk to, there's always been somebody to spread the message to, there's always been somebody. And so I just got to stop for a moment and just say, like, how grateful I am. How grateful I am that you guys are here and that you come in and that you chat me up and that we're spreading this stuff around. I hope you're telling your friends. I hope you're telling your family. I hope you're doing all that kind of stuff because I want to see this channel grow. Obviously, I hope you want to see this channel grow, and you lot are like the early investors. You lot are the early ones, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Unbelievably grateful. Well, thank you, Misty. That's so nice. I'm just happy you're here. I'm just happy you're here. Ugh. Protesters against old growth logging rally outside Justin Trudeau's Vancouver hotel. This is how you do it. Fuck this, like, going to, like, a Bay Street or going to where, like, the lawyers are or any of this kind of stuff. You gotta go to where they live. You gotta go to their houses, right? Like, I am constantly in awe and constantly shocked with how difficult it is to convince people to just go to Doug Ford's house. We know where it is. It's not hard to find. It's not a secret, right? We know where his house is. Like, you literally can type in Doug Ford's house and find it. It's super easy. But if you bring this up to Canadians, oh, that seems a bit bridge too far, doesn't it? Oh, that seems a bit, because, you know, Canadians are well trained to be passive, gullible consumers, right? That if you actually point out, like, hey, these motherfuckers are throwing people onto the streets. Like, these guys do not give a shit about us at all, right? Have you noticed? Have you noticed how Doug Ford is a fucking raging sociopath who doesn't give a fuck about anyone but himself and his Timmies? Have you noticed? Right? And I'm being told that it would be uncouth to go to his house and cause him problems. Like, we should absolutely be going to Doug Ford's house. We should absolutely be going to Justin Trudeau's house. And Justin Trudeau is in a hotel, go there. Cause him problems. Don't let him just go get his Timmies, right? Don't let him just, like, send an assistant or something, right? Close the fucking shit down. Fucking shit on his chest. Like, fuck this shit. Fuck all this shit. What's happening in Fairy Creek? What's happening in Fairy Creek is fucking a total disaster and a nightmare, right? We've got trees in Fairy Creek that are as old as human civilization, right? We've got 1,000-year-old trees in Fairy Creek that we can chop down because they're worth $100,000, right? It's and if you chop them down, they don't come back. Right? So it's an ecological disaster. And moreover than that, people go and they start causing problems. And they start causing problems. I had a great link here. And they start causing problems. And the police come and they beat them up. Right? That you stand in the way of these people who are attempting to destroy us. And we get beat up for it. Fuck that noise. Yeah, I gotta start closing some of this. Oh, hey, here's a bit of a pivot. Here's the NDP's Quebec ads. they just came out with them. Let me do a refresh. I asked in the comments if somebody could do a bit of a translation. And it's just like something like, billionaires have made record profits during the crisis, but Justin Trudeau doesn't have the courage to make them pay. Like, you're going to see 3 ads in rapid succession.
La crise climatique, c'est une course contre la montre, pas une marche santé. Justin Trudeau a...
I think the one that matters the most, I'm just going to jump over to it. This is the one that really matters, just because of like the visualization of this. Look at this.
Les milliardaires ont fait des profits records pendant la crise. Mais Justin Trudeau n'a pas le courage de les faire payer. Avec l'NPD, les ultra-riches vont faire leur part pour relancer le Canada. Faut juste oser.
Straight up. Just like, fuck these billionaires, take shit away from them, right? And what was he saying there? Billionaires have made record profits during the crisis, but Justin Trudeau doesn't have the courage to make them pay. With the NDP, the ultra-rich will pay their fair share of Canada's recover. Let's be bold. This is, of course, a message that's going to be popular with Canadians, but the NDP, and specifically Jagmeet Singh, doesn't have much success in Quebec because he wears a turban. Sorry, Quebec is passing laws to make government officials take turbans and stuff off. And here's Jagmeet Singh walking around saying, like, yeah, vote me your leader. Not going to happen in Quebec. Not going to happen in Quebec. We'll see. We'll see. Not this time around, certainly. I'm going to leave that one open. So, this is a good one to leave open. Moving on, moving on. Oh yeah, here's a great one. We just bailed out the Catholic Church because they allowed their priests to rape kids. Who needs Pizzagate when you got this out in the open? It's from John Cooper. After intense lobbying, the Catholic Church won $1.4 billion in federal coronavirus aid, largely due to the financial stress that resulted from settling countless child sex abuse lawsuits. So, the Catholic Church abuses children, right? Huge pedophilia scandal. We're all aware of it. Loses a bunch of money because a bunch of people sue them. And then they turn around and lobby the government and get $1.4 billion because they had to pay for the pedophilia and abuse of those children. Excuse me? Like, excuse me? Like, America has a pretty big pedophile problem, eh? Like, I usually rail on it, but now it's just gotten so obvious. Like, it's just gotten so obvious. Like, the Jeffrey Epstein pedophilia sex ring, the Catholic Church's pedophilia sex ring, right? Like, we don't need conspiracy theories about this. We don't need some big Pizzagate thing. Like, we're pretty aware. Like, it's pretty fucking obvious that if you are a billionaire, if you are a politician, you are in some way wrapped up in these pedophilia sex rings, right? Especially if you get close to the presidency. Like, for God's sakes, Bill Clinton was on Jeffrey Epstein's island like 24 times. Donald Trump went there. Ivanka Trump went there, right? Like, I just don't know what else we need to see. I'm sure a Sikh taking money away from the Catholics would be a losing thing for the NDP. Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be. But, like, this is American news. But, like, it's just, like... And we pretend like we have a society. That's the best part. Like, we pretend like we have a society. Like, nah, we just have a business. And, you know, it's basic supply and demand, you guys. The wealthy demand to have sex with little girls and boys. And so they're supplied with that. It's just basic neoliberal economics, right? Here's another great one. The Bible doesn't mention anything about masks, so quit referencing God when you're saying you won't. Wait, what? The Bible does mention wearing masks when sick and social distancing? Leviticus 13, 45 to 46. Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. Like, one of the big things that the Christians don't like to admit, if they are aware of it, and they're not, but if they were, is that Leviticus is largely like health and safety shit. Like, if you open Leviticus, and I say do yourself the favor and actually like open Leviticus and like read a bit of it. Don't read the whole thing because God, but like it's mainly concerned with health and safety. That's mainly what it's for. That there are like some social laws and some kind of that kind of stuff, but like they're far more concerned about disease. They're far more concerned about cleanliness. They're far more concerned about a ton of this stuff than they are in this idea that like I've even heard it argued that the laws that we interpret to be like homophobic are actually there as like base cleanliness, right? That like, yeah, like think about what like homosexual sex entails, right? Like, do I need to get explicit about it? Like you're putting shit on your dick, right? Right? And you live in the fucking desert, right? Like, they don't have penicillin. They don't got any of this shit. So, like, yeah, they're concerned about health and safety. They're concerned about cleanliness. They're concerned about how to ensure that their society doesn't collapse due to a plague that sweeps through. You know, remember that the guys that made these laws, you know, according to the stories, right, they just witnessed 10 plagues. They're probably concerned about that. They're probably concerned about that. What are you curious about, Onward? You're giving me the atheist. I'm listening. Like that's what you're giving me. Always remember, okay? And I always preface this for people who might be listening and not participating in the chat and who have never heard me talk about the Bible. I read the Bible as a secularist. I don't reject the Bible. I don't read it and say there's magic in there, and so all that magic must be real and all that kind of stuff. I know pissed off Canadian. I'm not trying to like I'm not trying to as a heterosexual male. I understand that I am not really in the position to be making any kind of claim one way or another or anything like this. But what I'm trying to drive at when I bring this up is that the book of Leviticus, like the homophobic language that exists in Leviticus, there are literally 2 passages. Well, you can interpret that in many different ways, right? And some of the interpretations of those passages include things like health and safety issues, right? And include things or include things like here's a really brutal take that is not homophobic but accepts the reality of what's going on, which is so the actual line that exists in Leviticus is a man shall not lie with a man as he lies with a woman. Okay, that's the line. I know, dude, the cicadas are losing their mind. A man shall not lie with a man as he lies with a woman. This is an abomination. All right, so we're going to get into some really scary cultural shit right here, okay? But it's this is everything that follows is absolutely the truth. I don't pretend otherwise. So you're talking about like basically a proto-tribal society that is in the desert and has just fled from an oppressor that is attempting to build a society, right? Well, and they were slaves also. They're a slave society in the first place. And so women end up not being citizens. They end up just not having property rights. They end up not having, although there is an example in Leviticus of women getting property rights because of like special circumstances and things like this. Anyway. So women are property. That's just how it is in Leviticus, right? And it's there are a bunch of rules that surround women in the society, and who owns the woman, right? And so you can make an interpretation of this, a man shall not lie with a man as he does with a woman, to mean that a man shall not treat another man like a piece of property, right? That it's less interested in making a statement about homophobia and more interested in making a statement about property rights. And this is not, I'm not saying this. I understand the territory I'm in, okay? I am not saying this in order to justify that. I'm not saying this to say that, like, and this is the way it should be, right? But to say that this document, right, that's where we were. We were there. Humans were there. We've come a long way since. But if we want to go back to that, we can do that. Yes, eggshell. Like, it sucks because I actually do love talking about the Bible. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I just know that I get into dangerous territory a lot. Like here's one of the stories that drives me crazy that atheists especially tell themselves about the Bible, which is the story of Elijah. So Elijah is walking around out in the wilderness by himself, right? He's one of God's prophets, right? He's a wizard, essentially, which is sweet. He's like a sweet-ass wizard. And he's walking around in the wilderness, and he comes upon a group of children. And the children start to make fun of him and mock him, calling him things like Baldy and stuff like this. And so Elijah creates a bear and inflicts the bear on the children, right? And so the atheists are just like, this is outrageous. This is so outrageous that Elijah, an old man by himself in the desert, would create a bear and inflict it upon a gang of rebellious, rabblous children who are also hanging around in the wilderness, who are actively antagonizing him with insults that we don't take very seriously, but I bet Elijah took pretty fucking seriously, as a gang of young men threatened him in the desert. This dumb narrative that exists within atheist circles about this particular story, about how, oh yeah, an old dude stumbles on a gang of young people who start to antagonize him and are likely going to kill him. Like, that's what should be understood in the story. If you know anything about, like, wilderness and tribal existence, you don't just stumble into a group of kids living in the wilderness, right? Like, they just fucking, like, Elijah was definitely under threat. Like, and to think otherwise when you listen to that story, I think is weird. And to me, it comes down to just like a semantic misunderstanding of, like, they put the word like kids or children in there, and like, yeah. So if a group of 12-year-olds, how many 12-year-olds would it take? You're out in the wilderness, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere. How many 12-year-old boys, no less, would it take antagonizing you before you wish you could create a bear and get rid of these fucking kids? 3. That's the number. 3. If there were 3 12-year-olds that were hassling you, antagonizing you, and threatening you, yeah, you would think to yourself, boy, I wish I could do something about this, like create a bear. Something about atheists, I think some religious people don't understand that many atheists are atheists not because we won't believe, but because we can't. Well, and it's especially true where you are, Onward, because the evangelicals are so fucking crazy, right? The evangelicals are crazy, dude. Like they're I think about like being raised by these evangelicals, and these fucking guys are nuts, dude. Like their whole belief system is like fucking insane. Not only insane, but just like all you have to do if you want to absolutely dismantle the evangelicals is read their own book. Like that's the grift that they're running on everybody, and probably even themselves, is that if you read the book, like just read the book, and you can quote the book at them, right? And the book itself, in many ways, they are like, in the time of Christ, there was a group called the Pharisees. And if you read the New Testament, there's a lot of Pharisee talk, right? That it's the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And guys, oh my God, I gotta play you this song. I just remembered this song. I've played this song a couple of times. Nope. Dang it. So this is a song that I played a lot. I sang a lot as a kid in the fundamentalist Christian school that I was a part of, okay? This is a song that I sang a lot, okay? I don't want to be a Pharisee. I don't want to be a Pharisee, 'cause they're no fair, you see. I don't want to be a Pharisee. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. And pray the Lord my soul to keep. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. Every day we would sing this song. I don't want to be a Sadducee. I don't want to be a Sadducee, 'cause they're so sad, you see. I don't want to be a Sadducee. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. And pray the Lord my soul to keep. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. For real. Like, I think there's one more verse that I'm forgetting offhand. Yes. There we go. That's what I was hoping for. Yeah, dude. Like, and I remember I had the sweetest, loveliest teacher, Miss Mackenzie. Or was it Miss Nelson that became Mrs. Mackenzie? Or was it Miss Mackenzie that became Mrs. Nelson? Anyway, yeah, exactly. And she would come in and she had like a mushroom cut bob, the big glasses, right? And she would just be like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be a hypocrite, 'cause they're not hip with it. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. And pray the Lord my soul to keep. I just want to be a sheep, ba 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 ba. And we would all sing, and it would be a great, lovely time. And like, in the kind of sweet way that Christians are, they didn't actually think this through. That like, the sheep reference is in reference to like Christ being like the Lamb of God, right? Like, and that we are followers of Christ, and so we are sheep, right? That the meek will inherit the earth and all that kind of stuff. But they didn't really think about it in terms of like, you know what a sheep is, right? Like, you know what you are if you're called a sheep, right? Like, wake up, sheeple, right? But this, like, that's a type of brainwashing, for sure. Like, I don't think it was, like, them sitting back and be like, and then the children will be bright, but, like, you're getting a bunch of kids to sing, you know, they want to be a sheep, all that kind of stuff. You're making them pliable. Like, you're making them pliable. What's the other one that I love? I'm remembering the other one, which is great, which also has this quality about it, where they're, like, completely missing the point. Life without Jesus is like a donut. Fucking it up. Jesus is like a donut. I'm screwing it up so bad. And it's so easy. It's a 3/4 and I'm just fucking it up. Jesus is like a donut. I'm so sorry, guys. So sorry. This it's gonna be good. It's gonna pay off. It's gonna pay off. Jesus is like a donut. Jesus is like a donut. Like a donut. Like a donut. Got it. Life without Jesus is like a donut. Like a donut. Like a donut. Life without Jesus is like a donut. There's a hole in the middle of your heart. But even as a kid, I was like, but donuts are delicious. Like, they could have chose any other. They could have chose like a bagel. Right? That would have been like right on line with the sort of like anti-Jew thing that they've got going on throughout a lot of their stuff, right? They chose donut, right? And as a kid, I'm just sitting there being like, I love donuts though, right? So you're telling me that life without Jesus is like a delicious pastry that I would eat every single meal of my life if I could. Oh man, so many hilarious things, man, like that growing up. Like the Bible indoctrination was so fucking real, and like the Left Behind series. Like I'm sure you guys are familiar even with the Left Behind one. That one kind of broke through. The Left Behind stuff broke through into the mainstream, which was great. But there's a ton of that stuff. Like for every like Left Behind series, and if you're not familiar with what the Left Behind series is, it's a series of books that came out probably in the late 90s. Kirk Cameron got really involved in it and made like a film version of it, did like a series of the books, and it's essentially just telling the story of the rapture in kind of a modern sort of thing. Like, what would happen if suddenly the rapture happened, right? And following through on the story of like that exists within Revelations, which anybody who's standing in front of you and is going like, Revelations is a book that we should definitely use as prophecy. We should definitely pay attention to the signs and the symbols and all that kind of shit. It's like, literally every single time somebody has done that, it has ended up in some kind of like conflagration or genocide that would have been completely easy to avoid, right? Would have been completely easy to avoid. That it's much easier for me to believe that John, who is the author of Revelations, John is the disciple that Jesus loved. He writes the book of John, right? Gives Christ the most human story that of the apostles. He is also the only apostle that is not crucified or executed, right? That all of the apostles, including the apostle Paul, are in some way executed, beheaded, crucified, burned at the stake, that kind of a thing, right? All the early Christians were, except John, who lives through this fucking nonsense. He is simply banished to isolation on an island, where he obviously does a lot of drugs, loses his mind, and writes the book of Revelations. Like, there is very little chance that John was lucid when he wrote this thing. That the shit that comes out of his brain while he's on this absolute, like, mushroom-fueled vision quest, which is what the Book of Revelations is. Like, the Book of Revelations is hardcore, dude. Like, it's awesome. I love reading the Book of Revelations. It's just like, it is super. If somebody made like a cartoon version, like had somebody read aloud the Book of Revelations while doing like an animation of the events as they were unfolding, I think people would go crazy for it. I think it would be super awesome. Like, do like a heavy metal, like fucking badass, like guitars riffing, like crazy shit going on, like angels in the sky, this big giant statue like shooting fucking swords and shit out of its mouth. Like, absolutely crazy shit happens in Revelations, and it's so obviously like a mushroom fueled like psychedelic journey. And the Gnostics knew it, right? Little known fact about the Gnostics. The Gnostics are a sect of Christianity that actually get cut off from Christianity and sort of expelled from Christianity at the end of the 3rd century at the Nicene Council, which, in my view, really ruined Christianity, because the Gnostics, near as I can tell, were the fun ones. They were the ones who actively were attempting to infuse their spirituality with mushrooms and psychedelics. They were the ones that were walking around saying things like, well, wait a minute, if Christ is the Son of God and Christ is also a human, doesn't that make me the Son of God? Doesn't that mean that I am also an iteration and one of the sons of God? And doesn't that mean that everyone here actually is divine? That we all, like, we're not separated from God, we're not separated from the gods, we are actually within the body of God? That it was the Gnostics that were walking around saying that. And of course, like, the emperor is just like, no, God is God and you are just a man and I talk to God and you do not. Like, obviously they wanted it to be that way. And so the Gnostics get chased off. The Gnostic Gospels are awesome. Like, they're very, like, they're way more progressive and way more liberal. It's been a long time since I've read them, and I should go back to them, because I remember having a good time with them. But I remember I read them when I was, like, still an evangelical Christian, right? So I had, like, this kind of, like, about it. And, like, in retrospect, I'm like, nah, those books were sick. Those books were sick. I should definitely go back. The music in churches I went to were so bad. Well, most of the churches, like, that's the one thing that the evangelicals have going for them, is that they modernized a lot of their shit. Because that's how they attracted a new generation to them, right? That, like, for my parents, going to that church was not because they, like, wasn't at first because they were serious Christians or anything. It was because they were new in town, they didn't know anybody, and there was, like, a bunch of young people their age going there. And why were the young people that age going there? Because when they went there, there was, like, decent music and you know, the moral message, right? The storytelling. Why not? Why not? Right? Why not? I went camping with my grandparents and we read some of the Book of Revelations every night for a week. I thought it was cool. It is cool, dude. It is. The Cathars had some interesting ideas. I don't think I'm that familiar with the Cathars, dude. This is the thing I love about talking about this kind of stuff, is that it's just a never-ending, like, you'll never reach the bottom of it. You'll never reach the bottom of it. Okay, it's just another name for, like, a Gnostic movement. Oh, but it was between the 12th and 14th century. The Cathars referred to themselves as good Christians. Yeah. Life without Jesus is like a donut, like a donut, like a donut. Life without Jesus is like a donut. There's a hole in the middle of your heart. And it's also a pastry that's delicious and everybody wants to eat it. I genuinely have a memory of myself as, like, a 6-year-old being like, this song, nah, this doesn't work. This doesn't hit it. Don't put Jesus up against donuts. Don't you do that to me. Don't you make me choose. Don't you make me choose between Jesus and the donut. don't you make me choose. Because the little 6-year-old me is going to be like, don't I? The belief may have originated in the Byzantine Empire. Awesome, dude. Awesome. I don't know anything about this. Like, it's just a never-ending. You will spend your whole life just constantly digging shit up and constantly figuring it out. And, like, why do these guys even exist? Like, why is there even these religious organizations and structures? And usually you find out that the reason why a religious organization or group begins in an area is because they're fulfilling some kind of spiritual practice or way of thinking that isn't being talked about or catered to, right? And like, I think about, like, there's going to be new religious movements that pop up in the Western world as the religious ideology of neoliberalism collapses and leaves behind a pretty big vacuum, right? As materialism collapsed. The Catholics had some downright anti-natalist views, celebrated homosexuality, looked down upon procreation. Looked down upon procreation, eh? Interesting. I for myself, I'm not like anti-procreation, but I definitely am like, I don't get it so much. I don't look at like having a kid and thinking to myself like, yeah, I'm doing that guy a favor. Yeah, what a favor I'm doing for this kid. This kid's definitely going to have a good time, right? Like, my feeling is that if there's even a question mark, if you're even standing there being like, I don't know if this kid is going to have a good time or not, big question mark, probably don't do it. Probably not. But I think there's something deeply, deeply, deeply embedded within us. I think that the people who are having kids just understand that they have to have a kid. You know? That, like, they aren't sitting there being like, and then I'll one day have a child because having a child is a sensible thing that a sensible person does. I think that there is, like, a need. I think there's just, like, a drive that exists in some people who are just like, I will have a child. And, like, I can 100% see, like, I know a couple that just recently had a kid, and I can for sure see her being like, I could see him being like, I don't know if now's a good time to have a kid, like, things are a bit weird, and like, it's all kind of, all this kind of stuff, and I can definitely see her being like, I want a child, I am having a child, and him being like, all right, very well. Like, I just think that if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. It's and that we as people like to walk around pretending like we have a handle on what's going on, and I just don't think we do. I think that we, like, justify things afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we create a justification after the fact, but for the most part, we're just sort of following our instincts. And that we trick ourselves into thinking that it was our intellectual brain that came up with this idea, that all of this kind of stuff, because that's like a myth we tell about ourselves so that we can feel better about the fact that we don't have control over any of this, that we're just doing shit, right? We're just fucking doing shit. And yeah, I'm with you on this, Ruth. Some people should not have children. Yeah. I also think, like, one of the things that I've come to understand about myself, and again, this is me getting a little too personal, but whatever. Like, I've come to understand that I'm actually a pretty hard man to live with. I've been having a lot of conversations with my dad and a lot of conversations about my grandfather, who was a very hard man to live with. And I'm really seeing, like, a lot of myself in my grandfather these days, and starting to kind of talk to my family and talk to the people around me, and I'm starting to really see, like, oh yeah, like, I think I'm a good man. I think that I'm trying to do good in the world, but boy howdy do I not think that I'm an easy man to live with. I think that I have a lot of odd quirks and very sort of strange, peculiar behavior that make it sort of, it takes a very particular sort of person to want to live in the same space as me, I think. It's a beautiful thing to grow a human inside of you, produce food for a human and teach them to help them to grow it. I get it. Yeah, of course, Misty, of course. And there is something, like, it's got to be very grounding and connect you. Anyway, the reason I told you that whole thing is because I like think about me raising a kid, and boy would that kid be weird. Like, that kid would be so fucking weird, you guys. Like, there's just no way that kid would be anything but, like, the strangest ball of strange. Because, like, I would talk to him how I talk to you. Like, he would be walking around. Like, we gotta seize the means of production. Right now, you just need to fucking go to school. Get the fuck out of here. Right? Like, I think about all the weird shit that my parents did to me, right? And, like, I know I would do exactly the same kind of weird shit, right? Thinking that I was doing the right thing. And then, like, they would go through their 20s and be all angsty about it and be like, everything is my parents' fault. And then they turn 30 and then be like, oh, my parents are just, they're as dumb as I am. They don't know what's going on. And, you know, you can kind of forgive people for that. That, I think, is the big thing about growing up, right? Is, like, the difference between, like, somebody who's grown up and somebody who's not is that somebody who's grown up looks at their parents and understands that their parents are just people, right? That their parents were just like, yeah, we built we were working good jobs, and so we thought have some kids, and so we had some kids, and, you know, we did our best raising you, and off you go. Right? They don't fucking know anything. They don't know what's going on, and nor should they. Nor should it be assumed that they could, right? And it makes it so much easier to forgive them, and it makes it so, well, forgive them even, but, like, not even forgive, but just, like, it makes them easier to, like, I feel like that classic angst of, like, kids have against their parents and all that kind of stuff. The moment you're grown up is the moment that you realize that all of that is nonsense. It doesn't matter. Like, your parents obviously did the best that they could for you. That they didn't really know what was going on either. They, for the most part, were probably ground into this capitalist machine of nonsense, right? And they just were doing their fucking best. And I think to expect more than that is wishful thinking. It's childish, right? It's that kind of childish, wishful thinking of, like, Santa Claus will bring gifts to us, right? My parents are infallible super people, and, like, the fact that they're not, accepting that they're not, I think that's the moment you grow up. Rich people should just not have kids. Just more entitled people walking around. Well, and this is the thing that I keep saying. Like, it's weird to me to see people who are actively involved in this process of climate change denial who know better, right? Like, this is where things get really weird, right? Like, the people who are involved in the fossil fuel industry, they read the memos, they know what the truth is, they understand what the situation is, right? The scientists told them the truth. They act like, you can't put forward a disinformation campaign unless you know what the truth is, right? If you don't know what the truth is, then you can't lie about it. And so they know what the truth is. And they still are deciding to do it, which means that they don't care about their own children, right? Like, I know I just said, like, oh, we got to forgive them and all that kind of stuff, but, like, these guys know better. They've seen the truth. They know what the evidence is. And they're still making this decision. Like, what kind of a person doesn't even care about their own children? Doesn't even attempt to care about their own children? Like, that's pretty shocking, right? That's one of the most shocking things that I think I say on this channel. Like, these people don't care about their own children. And it's very obvious. Like, it's very obvious that, like, the children were just had as, like, a trophy, right? As a way for them to find their own personal immortality. Because my bloodline will continue through my children. Like, that's all they care about. Seems like. Cathars believe that the good God was the God of the New Testament, creator of the spiritual realm, whereas the evil God was the God of the Old Testament, creator of the physical world, who many Cathars identified as Satan. Yeah, that duality, like, you can tell, like, early Christians especially, like, but Christians throughout really struggle with this idea that, like, well, there's like this divine force, but it's like it's not all evil. Like God's not like this evil, malevolent kind of thing. Like there's got to be like a good aspect to this, right? And I have landed on the simple truth that I don't think that God, I don't think that the creative energy that sustains all of us, that bears the label of God, knows what's going on. I think it's figuring it out as we're figuring it out. I don't think it knows what's going on. I think that it's just here. It was just created, right? Or it just attained sentience, created all this shit because it could, had no idea why it was creating any of this. It just could, so it did. And then goes around and is like, okay, well, what is any of this, right? And is investigating it as we are investigating it. And can you give such a thing a title like good or evil, right? Like, it's just total. What's happening, Ruth? Look at Kelly Ann Conway. Her daughter caused crap and told the truth about home life, so Kelly quit her job. Trump should have been fixed. No good came of them. Oh, yeah. I wish I could believe in God. I wish I could that kind of blind faith. I just can't. Well, the evangelical version of God is weird, right? It's because, like, the evangelical version of God is this idea of, like, some kind of separate entity that exists independently of anything, right? Whereas the actual Christian version that I've seen every theologian I've ever read talk about treats God more as more like quantum mechanics, right? Like, we are part of a quantum mechanical system. Like, let's just talk quantum mechanics, right? Like, so we are all one energy. That's just scientific fact, right? That we are all part of this one energy, this quantum energy, that exists as a base force, that when you start going low enough into the intrinsic nature of what we're made of and the matter that we are, it all sort of does descend into magic, more or less, that we don't really know why there are structures, right? But, like, we are basically just light and energy vibrating, so it maintains the kind of illusion that we're matter, right? That's all just quantum mechanics. That's just the modern science, right? Well, my question has always been and will always remain, is this energy sentient or not? Like, is the quantum energy sentient or not? Which is actually, I think, a real fun question to think about. I really hate the question, does God exist? Right? Because it creates a semantic argument and it gets boiled into nonsense. And I feel like the whole new atheist movement got completely bogged down in this semantic argument about what is or is not God. So, fuck all that. We know that there is a quantum energy. We know that we're a part of it. We know that we're created by it and sustained through it. We know that it is around us at all times. Is it sentient? And when you start going down that rabbit hole, you start having some real fun things, right? Like, well, if I am part of this energy, right, and this energy is all around us and it's it's everything, right? Well, then the energy is at least as sentient as I am, right? Right? Like, I'm part of it. There it is. It's at least as sentient as I am. And it's at least as sentient as you are. And it's at least as sentient as my little pug right here. Hi, little Mr. Pug. Right? And that all of our collective sentiences, it has to at least be as sentient as that. Right? Because it's impossible for me to imagine that I am sentient, but the energy that sustains me is not. Like, it is actually it's like logically incoherent. It doesn't make sense to me. That, like, if I consider myself sentience, then the energy that I exist in must also be sentient. At least as sentient as I am. And that's a fun conversation to have. I don't know how much it really matters. But, like, it does help me think about, like when I say that people are equal with one another, I'm dead serious about it, right? Like, because I believe that each and every one of us are a creation of divine energy within this quantum energy, right? That we are part of the larger body of what Christians and other like Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and all these guys have called God in the past, or Brahma, or any of this shit. And so when I say that I am equal to someone, I mean it very seriously. Like, we are light and energy and matter that have been constructed and born into this earth through the process of birth, right? Each and every one of us. And then we're here for a minute, right? We tool about, try to figure some shit out, try to articulate what the fuck is going on to one another. Because when I communicate to you and when you communicate to me, we are two divine beings communicating between one another, right? We are, if you want to put it in theological terms, we are God attempting to contemplate its own existence, right? And really figure out, like, what the fuck is this exactly? What the fuck is this exactly? And then after that brief period of time where we all die. And that's all baked in. That's the whole system, right? That's the whole journey every single time. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 feet tall, 10 feet tall, 350 pounds, a millionaire, a billionaire, right? None of that matters. All of that is just bullshit and trapping and nonsense that gets in the way of what we are obviously here to do as people, which is communicate with one another about what the fuck is going on here, and then structure this place so everybody has a good time. I don't understand this idea that says we should have a bad time. Like, who are these fucking people? Who are these people walking around saying that we should have a bad time? Right? Like, literally, you're telling me that you want to have a bad time. Don't you think that the energy that created us, as well as the people who live within that energy, want to have a good time? Don't you think that maybe if God was real, and if God was this divine energy, right, that such a force would want to have a good time? Don't you think? I think it would. Like, I think it would. This idea that we should all have a bad time seems a bit odd, frankly. Like, seems a bit odd. Like, why do you want to have a bad time? It's like when people denigrate people for, like, oh, you're playing a video game, or you're just watching TV, you're reading a book, you're doing whatever, X, Y, or Z. I'm like, yeah, because I want to have a good time, right? And what better time is there than enjoying the creation of another divine being, right? And then creating something for a different divine being to enjoy, right? And creating like a cultural feedback loop where we're all creating stuff that we all like to see, and turning that into a big conversation where we're all talking about kind of stuff. Nope. Instead of that, it's all Avengers shit, right? It's all just trash and garbage where we're like, let's glorify these kind of fascist icons. Nope, can't have a genuine conversation about why we're here and the nature of existence and any of that kind of shit. That's not part of the conversation, right? You gotta watch Thor blow some shit up because you're still a fucking 14-year-old reading comic books. Right? Yeah, if you guys ever want to get me to start talking about theology or any of that kind of shit, I will gladly do that. It's like one of my favorite subjects. I love talking about it. I don't do it a lot because I worry that I'm going to alienate people. I worry that I'm going to chase people away with it. And like this is a politics stream. Like I'm supposed to be talking about politics, but I think that this is part of politics, right? Like if you believe that you are like an independent, separate thing, that you're not part of a larger system, then you can believe that you're great and they suck, and I can't abide by this. Like I can't abide by this way of thinking that like my life is as equal and is as valuable as a disabled person who's collapsed on the street. That as far as I'm concerned, we have equal value. And my thinking is, if I was in that position, I would sure hope that something came along and improved that situation. Right? It's like some basic Good Samaritan shit. Anyway. I hope you guys are all doing really well out there. Thanks for sticking around and listening. I think I'm going to close this one down maybe a minute early. Always remember, you guys, you are divine beings. Walking around in divine energy. Don't let these fuckers gaslight you and convince you otherwise. You are beautiful people. Your existence by itself is justified. You don't need to justify anything to anybody. You don't need to justify yourselves to these capitalists. You don't need to justify yourselves to anybody, because your very existence is in and of itself a justification. Because you were created by a divine energy, and that divine energy wants you here. And there is no force that is more important or greater than that. Good night to you, Misty. Thanks for your wonderful words. All right, guys. Good luck. We're going to need it.